Chapter 2154. But for some reason he had suddenly resigned. Why was that? She could not figure it out. Her vicious gaze suddenly landed on Yun Shirshir as she questioned her suspiciously. "It's you, isn't it?" "Yes." "It's all because of you, isn't it?" She yelled at her aggrievedly and angrily. "Brother Mu stepped down because of you, right?" Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and smiled, but she admitted it honestly. "Yes." Her two words were light as a feather, but they pierced the Missy's heart like an awl. She was completely stunned. Brother Mu actually gave up his position as the head of the Mu family because of me? How could this be? What kind of charm does this woman have to make an ambitious man like Brother Mu give up on the Mu group? I don't believe it. Why did it turn out like this? Song Enya still found it hard to believe. She kept muttering to herself, but she could not get an answer. Yun Shirshir kindly explained, "That's because the Muse wanted him to make a choice between the head of the family and me. That's why this is his choice. Are you satisfied with this answer?" Seeing that Song Enya was completely stunned, Yun Shirshir did not have the mood to entertain her any longer. She flung her sleeve aside and left on her own. The door was slammed shut with a bang. Song Enya fell to the ground weakly. Her eyes were blank as she looked haggard and lost her soul. Why? Yun Shirshir started the car and sat in it. She looked at the rearview mirror and saw that her face was a little pale. She tidied her hair, which had been messed up by the wind, but she still could not sort out her frustrated emotions. It was not that she did not trust him enough. She believed that this man, who was bold and responsible enough to give up his power for her, would never do anything to let her down. What kind of opportunity did he have to make Song Enya pregnant with his child? She had actually read through the report seriously. Because of her experience, she had some understanding of such matters. Generally speaking, it was impossible to fake a personal appraisal, unless one was extremely powerful. Only then would they have the ability to do so. Besides, Song Enya had already said that they could do another paternity test at any time if they wanted to verify it. She did not look like she was lying. She was really pregnant with his child. The results of the comparison showed that there was indeed a personal relationship between them. She did not know what kind of trick Song Enya had used, but the thought that the Missy was carrying her beloved man's child made her feel as if she had swallowed countless fish bones. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in her throat and it was extremely painful. She might not be able to be that carefree. How could Yun Shirshir not guess her niece's motive? She wanted to get pregnant with his child. She wanted to use her to sow discord between them, thus creating a gap between them and driving a wedge between them. Naturally, she would not allow her to achieve her goal just like that. However, there were some things that just couldn't be understood. She was not strong enough to control her emotions at will. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath, grabbed the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. When she reached home and opened the door, she saw Mu Yaja sitting on the sofa with his head lowered, flipping through the newspaper. Chapter 2155. After returning from Xingyu Financial Group and reaching home, the two little lads said that their mommy had left in a hurry. He called her and found out that she was on her way back. After giving her a few reminders, he sat back on the sofa and flipped through the financial newspaper he had just bought. As expected, an entire day had passed, and there was no news from the Mu Group. Perhaps the public relations department was preparing anxiously. Perhaps tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Mu Group would probably send out an official announcement of his resignation. Mu Linfeng was probably in a terrible state now. Dealing with it in such a way could minimize the negative impact of this matter. This was what he had to worry about now. At this moment he was probably gnashing his teeth in hatred. Mu Yaja heard the sound of the door opening and saw that a certain little woman had finally returned home. He smiled and said, "Why are you so late?" Yun Shirshir stood at the door, but she was not elated by his usual greeting. She leaned against the door and casually placed the car keys on the table. Thus, she leaned against the door and lowered her head, looking a little lonely and powerless. At this moment, her state could be described as gloomy. With her head lowered and her frown, Mu Yaja was also confused. He did not know what this little woman had gone through outside to come back with a stomach full of anger. But in reality? Along the way she comforted herself, but she still could not figure it out. Even in front of Song Enya she was arrogant and merciless in her ridicule. But when she turned around and was alone, she could not comfort her state of mind. On one hand, she could stand in Mu Yaja's position and repeatedly tell herself that he would not betray her. On the other hand, when she thought about how Song Enya was pregnant with his child, she felt sad and even jealous. There was a part of her that felt unbalanced in her heart. At the same time she felt greatly wronged. After all, think about it. Another repulsive woman used the fact that she was pregnant with her man's child to force her to abdicate. No one would be able to adjust their mood quickly. Given her conservative mindset, how could she have guessed that Song Enya had used her methods to steal the sperm to achieve such a pioneering feat of artificial insemination? Muyaja found that something was wrong with her. He suddenly got up and walked in front of her, but he saw that she kept her head down and didn't say a word. She looked very depressed. "What happened?" he asked. Yun Shirshir suddenly pushed him away expressionlessly and walked to the dining table. She poured herself a cup of cold water and gulped it down. It was only after she downed the glass of water that she seemed to have calmed down a little. Once she had calmed down, she raised her head and looked at the man, who had sat down beside her without saying a word, and finally said, "Song Enya asked to meet me today." Muyaja was also surprised. "She's back in the capital? Looks like you're not well informed enough." She didn't know why, but there was a bit of sarcasm in her words. It was as if she needed him to bear some of her unhappiness so that she could feel better. Chapter 2156. I'm not in the company anymore, so I naturally don't get the latest news. Yun Shirshir used a single word to express her displeasure. Muyaja was not annoyed. Instead, as if dealing with a sulking child, he gently rubbed her head with his large palm and asked gently, "What's wrong? You're back and you look so tense." "How can I be in a good mood after meeting AB*Tisich?" She retorted self-righteously, but because of the man's gentle patience, the anger in her heart subsided a lot. "What did she do to you? Tell me about it." Yun Shirshir gripped the glass of water tightly and suddenly exerted force. Perhaps she exerted too much force, so much so that the back of her hand vaguely showed green veins. She blew on her head with a gloomy expression. Her shoulders did not move at all, and there was no undulation as if she was brewing. Suddenly she said, "Song Enya told me that she's pregnant." "Song Enya is pregnant?" Muyaja, on the other hand, was not too surprised by this. He merely raised a brow but did not comment on it as he quietly observed her expression. Yun Shirshir continued, "I thought it was fake, but she took out a paternity test report. It said, there is a relationship between father and daughter. Tell me what's going on." "A paternity test?" "Yes. This kind of report can't be forged, right?" Yun Shirshir waited for him to give a reasonable explanation. But after waiting for a while, the man rested his chin on his hand and lazily said, "Oh." Yun Shirshir exploded. "What do you mean by, oh? Isn't he surprised? Isn't he going to ask what's going on? Could it be that he knew about Song Enya's pregnancy? But under normal circumstances, other than the person involved, who else would know about this kind of thing?" The anger in Yun Shirshir's heart surged up again, filling her chest. She couldn't calm down and her eyes became red and swollen. She shouted at him angrily, "Aren't you going to give me an explanation?" Behind the wall, Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion in the living room and quietly hid behind the wall. However, it seemed like something troublesome was going on and it was not convenient for them to show themselves. Hence, they could only hide behind the wall and eavesdrop. Muyaja suddenly chuckled. "I found out that you little guy can get jealous too." His tone, which was full of indulgence, did not extinguish the knot in her heart. Instead, it fueled her anger. "What are you talking about? Can you explain this matter to me?" She was not annoyed by Song Enya but by this man's cold attitude. Yun Shirshir glared at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she held it in because of her stubbornness. This was clearly such a serious matter, yet he was still laughing? He even used such a doting tone. Did he think that he could hypnotize her anger and calm her down? Yun Shirshir suddenly felt quite indignant, but she heard him suddenly ask, "Did she tell you that she's pregnant with my child?" "Yes." "Do you believe it then?" He stared at her seriously, wanting to hear her answer. Chapter 2157. Muyaja's heart warmed when he heard that. Then, in a gentle and charming tone, he asked her, "What other explanation do you want from me?" Yun Shirshir continued to pull a long face, stubbornly wanting an explanation. She pouted and said unhappily, "She couldn't have gotten pregnant for no reason, right? Could it be that the child in her stomach is a ghost fetus?" Muyaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Yun Shirshir struggled at first, pushing him awkwardly and pounding his chest with her little pink fists. However, her weak strength was nothing to him. The man reached out his other hand and stopped her easily. Seeing that she was about to flare up, he suddenly said, "The child in her stomach isn't mine." "What?" Yun Shirshir's eyes widened in shock. Muyaja laughed. "You heard it? How is that possible? If it's not your child, whose child could it be?" She had burned the report in a fit of anger. If it hadn't been burned, she would have brought it back and flung it at his face so that he could see it with his own eyes. In the report she showed you before the paternity was confirmed, was there such a sentence at the end, excluding the interference of identical twins, close relatives, and external help? Yun Shirshir racked her brains for a moment and suddenly recalled that there was indeed such a sentence in the report. Seeing her pondering expression, Muyaja smiled. Do you remember now? Looks like you're not stupid after all. You know how to read that sentence. He teased her, but Yun Shirshir slapped his hand away. And then? What does this sentence mean? Muyaja said casually, in other words, if she's pregnant with someone else's child, a paternity test will also show that we're related. Yun Shirshir was stunned. What do you mean? Muyaja flicked her forehead in exasperation and snorted. You little fool. Now you know how to be quiet? You looked like a crazy kitten just now. He coaxed her with just a few words. After she calmed down, Muyaja told her everything from the beginning to the end. Ever since Song Enya left the hospital without saying goodbye and went missing for a few days in Sea City, he quickly found out about her whereabouts. Through investigation he found out that this crazy woman wanted to secretly use artificial insemination to get pregnant with his child so that she could threaten him into marrying her. The Mews were in charge of a private sperm bank, where most of the Mews' resources were kept. Song Enya had bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank. After getting her hands on the stuff, she settled down in an American hospital. After a short period of recuperation and intense preparation for pregnancy, she finally succeeded. However, he had already found out about this matter and secretly arranged for the sperm she had stolen to be swapped with Mu Yenqing's. Furthermore, he had also destroyed all the sperm he had stored in the sperm bank. This was to prevent something like this from happening again. In fact, preserving genes was a common practice in the Mews. However, he had always scoffed at this kind of cooking. Chapter 2158. The reason why his sperm was kept in the sperm bank was because 7 years ago, Yun Shirshir wanted to be a surrogate for the Mu family. Initially, she had considered using artificial insemination. However, because her physical condition was not suitable for it, they changed the method. Muyaja just forgot to destroy it. It was all thanks to Song Enya, who reminded him that there was such a hidden danger. Hence this time he destroyed it all. However, the funny thing was that the quality of Mu Yenqing's sperm did not seem to be too good. Song Enya was completely in the dark and even suffered a lot in order to get pregnant. Test tube babies were very painful and costly. As the one who got pregnant, she had to suffer a lot. However, Song Enya did not hesitate and swore not to give up until she got pregnant. After a lot of torment, she finally succeeded. However, the funny thing was that the child she had tried so hard to conceive was going to disappoint her in the end. Although the paternity test report proved that they were related by blood, it was still because the child in Song Enya's stomach was his nephew. Oh. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows thoughtfully. So that's how it is. Oh. Muyaja imitated her tone and suddenly pulled her into his arms and ravaged her. Little fool, I wonder who was the one who was angry at me earlier. Now that you know the truth, your anger has subsided? His large palm could not stop ravaging and rubbing her face. Yun Shirshir knew that she was in the wrong, so she let him rub her face. It hurt a little, so she slapped his hand away and said angrily, I didn't know. How would I know that she would use such a shocking method to get pregnant with your child? How would I know that you've secretly replaced Mu Yenqing's sperm with yours? You didn't tell me any of this. How would I know? She felt extremely wronged. Yes, she was not calm enough, but any woman would remain calm and rational when faced with such conclusive evidence. She was angry and jealous because she cared too much about him. Her concern made her lose her mind. When the two little lads who were hiding behind the wall saw that the matter had been settled, they looked at each other in relief and returned to their room. Really? How old were they? This pair of clowns was still so worrisome. In the living room, Yun Shirshir was still a little angry. Song Enya had already come knocking on his door. Although he had received a satisfactory and reasonable explanation for the matter, he was still very unhappy about it. Are you jealous? He was half playful and half coaxing. His tone was gentle, but there was a hint of mischief in it. Yun Shirshir snorted and nestled in his arms. Her tone was rather coquettish. How would I dare? She's the little sister that you've always doted on. All these years, the one who's been by your side is her, not me. How would I dare to compare myself with her and covet her position in your heart? Before he could finish his sentence, a strong sour smell assaulted his nostrils, making him choke. Muyaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't that he hadn't seen her jealous before, but it was the first time he saw her being so jealous. He rarely mentioned anything about Song Enya to her. However, this woman had heard about it from some unknown channel, so much so that she had a strong hostility toward his and Song Enya's past. Chapter 2159. Muyaja raised his eyebrows and retorted disapprovingly, "Thoughts? What thoughts can I have?" Yun Shirshir pouted at his nonchalant tone. She punched his chest again and muttered unhappily, "I'm the one asking you. Can't you just answer me properly?" The man asked shamelessly again, "What kind of answer do you want?" "You." Yun Shirshir was exasperated. She crossed her arms over her chest and turned her face away, ignoring him. Seeing that she was really angry, Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. He had provoked her on purpose so that he could enjoy watching her get jealous over him. What she didn't know was that in his eyes she looked so cute when she was so spoiled. This little fool had always been so obedient and sensible in front of him. She was so sensible that she didn't seem like his girlfriend, but more like a virtuous sister. The problem was that he wanted her to be like a beautiful and delicate princess, the moon surrounded by stars, high above the masses, elegant and charming. Women like to be a little willful. In front of the man they loved they would be a little mischievous and aloof. It was the dream of many women to be able to be doted on and treasured like a luminous pearl in the palm of their hand. But this woman, perhaps because of her circumstances, had an extremely insecure personality. Perhaps it was because she was so afraid of losing him that she rarely showed her most common instinct as a wife, jealousy, on her face. In front of him, there were many times when she was trembling with fear and trepidation. She didn't dare to be willful or unreasonable. Sometimes she would even show her fear that he would be angry. That kind of cautiousness made his heart ache and gave him a headache. He didn't want her to be so uneasy beside him. Compared to being obedient and sensible, he hoped that she would be more unreasonable, more arrogant, and more dependent on him. Even if she was really like those noble princesses, so what? It wasn't like he couldn't pamper her. The greatest love a man could give to a woman was to pamper her like a princess for the rest of his life. He reached out and pulled her into his arms again. Yun Shirshir snorted, obviously not wanting to bother with him. Even though she was pulled into his arms, she struggled a little. Her face was dark and she seemed to be sulking. Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. "My little fool, you're so cute even when you're jealous." She retorted in exasperation, "Who said that I'm jealous?" Muyaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Every expression on your face, every look, tells me that you're jealous. What do you think?" She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, only to see him smiling playfully. Her face burned as if it had been doused with molten iron. She blushed in embarrassment, but she still stubbornly pouted. "When did I? What jealousy? It's so weird. Be good. Don't let your imagination run wild between me and Enya." Muyaja had only said one sentence when Yun Shirshir glared at him with extreme sensitivity and gnashed her teeth. "Enya. You call her so intimately." "Cough. That woman." Muyaja hurriedly corrected himself. Yun Shirshir's expression then eased a little. She suddenly muttered with lingering fear, "Actually, I've been thinking, what if your plan failed this time?" Chapter 2160. Muyaja furrowed his brows. He did not understand what she meant when she said that the plan had failed. If you didn't replace your thing in time, and Song Enya got pregnant with your child, what would you do? Yun Shirshir looked up and stared at him seriously. She was eager to get the answer from him. Her question was because of her sense of security. Muyaja curled his lips, but his expression was full of arrogance. There are no ifs. If a man can't even control his own child, wouldn't he be a failure? What if you failed? It's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? What if? She stubbornly wanted to know what he would do if he were in such a situation. Would he still be as carefree as he was now when Song Enya got pregnant with his child? Muyaja pondered for a moment and then said without hesitation, "I'll probably force her to abort the child." Abort? She stared at him with widened eyes and breathless eyes, feeling incomparably shocked. Abort? So cruel? Although she hated Song Enya and even loathed her, the child in her stomach was innocent. However, no one was surprised by his answer. This man had always been ruthless and cold. He would not leave any leeway for others. Such an answer gave her a great sense of security. To her, this was the best way to protect her. In this matter, Muyaja's choice was probably to minimize the harm to her. Even so, this man could be so decisive and cold at times that it made one's heart palpitate. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked, "That's your flesh and blood. Can you bear to abort it?" Muyaja lowered his head and pulled her into his embrace. He playfully caressed her red lips with his slender fingers, pressing them a few inches before gently caressing them. When he was done, he gently lowered his gaze to look into her eyes. Suddenly, he lowered his head and gently sucked on the corner of her lips. Yun Shirshir's red lips parted slightly. With a howl, she bit his fingertip. Her pearly white teeth rubbed against his fingertip and nibbled gently. However, she did not use much force, just like a kitten's bite. From his point of view, the woman sucking on his fingertip was a little too seductive, so much so that he immediately thought of another kind of extreme pleasure. Under such a visual impact, a certain part of him suddenly heated up. Even his body gradually became boiling hot. Yun Shirshir coquettishly said, "In the future, mind your own business. Don't create such trouble again." Just as her voice fell, Yun Shirshir suddenly realized that her words seemed to have implied another embarrassing meaning. Her face instantly heated up. "What do you mean by an acre of land? How could she not control herself and say such a dirty joke? He must have been a bad influence on her." When Muyaja heard this, he found it interesting and nodded. "Okay, I'll mind my own business. Such a thing will never happen again." With that said, the man bent down and kissed her lips. After a charming and inseparable kiss, he hugged the back of her neck and pressed his lips against hers. He said seductively, "My child can only have one mother." Chapter 2161. The man pecked her lightly before continuing. "My child can only have one mother. It can only be you." Yun Shirshir was extremely moved when she heard that. She smiled warmly and hugged Muyaja back. Her heart was warm, and under her emotions she let out a heartfelt chagrin. "Do you know? I'm indeed jealous of Song Enya. I'm jealous of her for being able to accompany you in your best years. I've been thinking that fate is really unfair. Why didn't I meet you earlier? How great would it have been if we had met earlier?" Muyaja was stunned for a moment when he heard that. Then he laughed helplessly and looked at her dotingly. Gently tucking her hair behind her ear, he chided, "Silly girl." Yun Shirshir remained silent as she snuggled into her husband's embrace, feeling extremely sentimental. The man's gentle voice suddenly sounded above her head. "We didn't meet too late. Ha! I'd rather meet you later and be with you for the rest of my life." Yun Shirshir's eyes flickered. She had not expected Muyaja to say such touching words. This was probably the warmest thing he had ever said to her, wasn't it? She could not help hugging him tightly. Her hands clutched at his collar as tears welled up in her eyes. "Shirshir, what you have is the best version of me." With that, he carried her in his arms and slowly walked into the bedroom. 11 o'clock at night. The night was getting darker. When Muyaja walked out of the shower and sat on the bed, he saw that the screen of his phone was lit up. Just as he picked it up, his ringtone suddenly rang. It was a call from a number. He glanced at it. It was an unknown number, but it was not difficult to guess who it was. He immediately guessed who it was. Muyaja sat at the head of the bed and casually lit a cigarette. Then he calmly answered the call. Song Enya's helpless and choked voice could be heard from the other end. He was never one to drag his feet. Now that his niece was back, he naturally had to make things clear. Firstly, he didn't want to be the scapegoat. Secondly, he was actually looking forward to the show that was about to unfold. Rumor had it that Mu Linfeng intended to arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing and had set his sights on the Lin family's third daughter. He was quite well informed in this regard. Although he was not in Mu Group now, the people in Mu Group were all his spies. It was easy for him to know every move of Mu Group. Now that Song Enya was pregnant, if the Muse were to find out that she was carrying Mu Yanqing's child, things would definitely develop in an interesting manner. As soon as he answered the call, he heard Song Enya's hoarse and choked voice. "Brother Mu, what should I do? Woo." As she wept bitterly, she sought his pity. A certain part of a woman's nature was stimulated to the extreme at this moment. Women had always been more fragile and pretentious than men. At this moment, Song Enya tried her best to put herself in the most inferior position, only hoping that Muyaja would take pity on her. Even if it was just pity, she hoped that he would reach out and hug her. She really missed him. Chapter 2162. Muyaja took a deep puff of his cigarette but did not say anything. He just held the phone silently and listened to the sobbing sound from the other end. However, at this moment, her helplessness, confusion, and despair could not move him at all. He was already so disappointed with this woman that no matter how pitiful she looked, it would not make him feel any pity for her. She cried, "Brother Mu, can you come and accompany me? I have something to tell you." Muyaja pondered for a moment before agreeing. "Okay, where are you?" "A cafe in the city center. I'll wait for you in the private room of the restaurant where I treated you to drinks in the past." She desperately hoped that he would appear in front of her in the next second. Muyaja responded. Just as he hung up and put down his phone, he saw Yun Shirshir push open the door and walk into the bedroom. She saw him putting down his phone. Earlier in the bathroom she heard him talking. He seemed to be on the phone with someone. She suspected that it was Song Enya who had called. In her vigilance she rushed out without drying her hair. Muyaja could not help but laugh when he saw that she was full of vigilance. This little idiot is quite vigilant. Yun Shirshir cleared her throat and pretended to be calm as she asked, "It's so late. Who called?" Muyaja glanced at her and said calmly, "Song Enya." I know it's her without guessing." "Then why are you asking when you already know the answer?" Yun Shirshir pouted and glanced at him. Actually, she just wanted to see if he would tell her the truth. After all, in the past he would never tell her anything no matter what. However, ever since she complained to him about this problem that day, this man paid special attention to this aspect and improved a lot. At least, no matter what she asked, even if it was about company matters and she did not understand, he would tell her seriously. Seeing that he did not deliberately hide it from her, she pursed her lips and said, "I guessed that she would call you. She must be looking for you because of the child in her stomach, right? Poor thing. She probably naively thinks that she's pregnant with your child and wants you to take responsibility for it." Thinking about it this way, it was extremely scary. This man was really super scheming. When he knew that Song Enya was pregnant with his child, he was not angry about it. In a situation where he did not say a word, even someone as vigilant as Song Enya did not notice his trick. He actually carried out his plan without anyone knowing. Furthermore, he was at ease watching Song Enya, like a clown, go through all the trouble and suffering and finally get pregnant with his child. Fortunately, he was able to maintain his composure. Under such circumstances, he was still able to calmly come up with such a meticulous plan. If he did not have some tricks up his sleeve and shrewdness, he would not be able to achieve such a position. Still, after witnessing his style of doing things, she could not help but be surprised. For such a man, one would either be on the same side as him. If one were to become his enemy, one would definitely be played in the palm of his hand and die without knowing how. Thinking of this, Yun Shirshir felt better and silently sympathized with Song Enya. She would not die if she did not seek death. The sins of heaven could be forgiven, but the sins of one's own doing were the hardest to bear. She had to bear the consequences of her own actions. Chapter 2163. Muyaja nodded. Yun Shirshir said, "Go ahead then, since she wants to see you." Muyaja was a little surprised. "You're so assured that I'll go? What else can I do?" Yun Shirshir suddenly fiddled with her hair, which was still a little wet, and smiled coquettishly. "It's already so late. I don't believe that you'll abandon your beautiful wife for another woman." "He wouldn't dare, humph." Muyaja chuckled and suddenly said, "I'll give you 10 minutes to blow-dry your hair." His domineering tone was just like his style. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes. "What?" Muyaja stubbed out his cigarette and took a deep breath. Then he slowly got up and walked to her side. He grabbed her hand and kissed her fingertips. "You'll go with me?" Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on her lips. "Okay." Half an hour later, Muyaja drove over. After parking the car, Yun Shirshir got out and looked up. She broke out in a cold sweat. "Isn't this the place where Song Enya asked me to meet? Could it be that she hasn't left after so long? It's already 11 at night. The cafe should be closed by now, right?" Muyaja locked the car and walked forward to hug her. Seeing her dazed expression, he looked down and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Let's go in." Yun Shirshir smiled at him, only to see the man reach out and interlock his fingers with hers tightly as they walked into the cafe together. As soon as the two of them entered, the waiter hurried over and said with a trembling smile, "Hello, both of you. I'm sorry. We're already closed. I have an appointment with someone to meet me here." As soon as he said that, the waiter came to a realization and shook his head helplessly. "Is that lady right? Actually, our cafe is already closed, but she seems to be in a bad mood. She's sitting alone in the private room looking very down. We're too embarrassed to say anything. If it's convenient for you, please talk to her. We're in a hurry to get off work." The cafe was supposed to close at 10, but it was already 11 now. Naturally, they could not get off work if the customer did not leave. Yun Shirshir nodded. The waiter led them to the door of the private room and said with a smile, "This is the place." With that, he pushed the door open. Inside the private room, Song Enya stood up agitatedly when she heard footsteps coming from outside. "Brother Mu is here. So fast." She had originally despaired and thought that he probably wouldn't show up tonight. She did not expect him to still show up. It must be because he still can't forget her? He must still have some feelings for her. As long as that was the case, everything would be much easier. Song Enya knew Wuxia best. He had always been a sentimental person. Although she had done a lot of things to anger him in the past, they were still very close to each other. Moreover, she was pregnant with his child now. He would definitely take responsibility for her. With such hope in her heart, Song Enya quickly walked to the door. When she saw Wuxia halfway through the door, a bright and beautiful smile appeared on her face as she called out gently, "Brother Mu." Thus, she was touched and rushed over, wanting to throw herself into his arms. Chapter 2164. When Yun Shirshir walked in behind him, Song Enya froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body stiffened as if ice water had poured over her head, and she could not move an inch. Yun Shirshir. Why is she here? Ah, how could she forget? Now that Brother Mu was with her, the two of them were already married and had a grand engagement ceremony. She should have been beside him when she called him. How could I not think of that? Still, why did Brother Mu bring me here? Was he worried that I would be worried? But in the past he was not such a man who cared about others. He had always been swift and decisive in doing things. He was rarely so meticulous, and it was all because of a woman. At the thought of this, Song Enya's face fell. Wuxia and Yun Shirshir walked into the private room and saw her standing there alone. Although the room was brightly lit, she seemed to be surrounded by darkness and was lifeless. "Didn't you ask me to talk to you about something important?" Wuxia hugged Yun Shirshir and sat down calmly. "Have a seat." Song Enya stood rooted to the spot for a long time before she reluctantly turned around and sat down opposite them. She kept struggling in her heart. If Yun Shirshir were to follow them, then she would be in a very passive situation. Some things were not easy to say in front of her. Song Enya held the glass in her hand. The milk in it had already turned cold. Ever since her pregnancy was confirmed, she had been very careful about the child in her womb, afraid that she would not be able to protect this precious bone. This was her last bargaining chip. It was considered a desperate throw. If she could not protect it, then all her efforts would be in vain. Therefore she was very careful in everything. The waiter walked in and asked politely, "Would you like to order anything?" Wuxia took the menu gracefully and turned his head gently to ask, "Wifey, what would you like to drink?" Wifey. She had already changed her way of addressing him so intimately. Song Enya lowered her head and sat where she was, clutching the corner of her dress. Just these two words were enough to stab her to the bone. The two people opposite him were constantly discussing what to drink and dessert to eat. Sometimes they would bicker and sometimes they would look at each other and smile. They were so intimate and tacit that they didn't look like a newlywed couple at all. Instead, they looked like a couple who had been married for several years and still had a stable relationship, loving and warm. What was this? Was he putting on an act for her? This must be Yun Shirshir's plan. She wanted to use the opportunity to show off her affection with Brother Mu in front of her to deal a blow to her. Since when had Brother Mu been so gentle to a woman? Song Enya was jealous and sad at the same time. It was as if a healed wound had opened up again, only to discover that it had festered and turned into pus. "No coffee." "I want to drink coffee." Wuxia didn't care about her argument. He turned his head and instructed the waiter, "Warm up a glass of warm milk and half a bath. Another espresso, no drinks." "Okay." The waiter smiled as he placed the order. "Madam, your boyfriend dotes on you very much. He's so considerate. You two look so loving." Chapter 2165. We're already married. As he spoke, he held Yun Shirshir's hand and interlocked their fingers. The diamond rings on their ring fingers were undoubtedly a declaration that they were officially husband and wife. The waiter was caught off guard and stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. He apologized. "Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. But seeing how young you are, I thought you were a young couple. I hope you'll be happy for a long time." The envy in his words made Song Enya feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. Watching the person she loved embrace another woman and receive the envious blessings of others was like sharp thorns stabbing into her heart. The pain was unbearable. Song Enya picked up the glass with trembling hands. Just as she was about to take a sip of milk, she accidentally knocked the glass of milk over on the table, perhaps due to her absent-mindedness. "Ah!" she screamed uncontrollably, interrupting the harmonious atmosphere in the private room. The waiter glanced at her and saw that the glass of milk had been knocked over on the table. The milky white liquid dripped all the way down the table and wet the hem of her dress. "Be careful." The waiter kindly walked forward, picked up a clean cloth in his hand and wiped her clean. Seeing the other's hand reaching for her dress, Song Enya reflexively protected her lower abdomen and swatted the other's hand away. "Don't touch me." The waiter waved his hand and retreated to the side, feeling extremely uneasy. Song Enya came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously lost her composure. She immediately blushed and said, "I'll wipe it myself." "Oh." The waiter politely handed her a white cloth. Song Enya took it with trembling hands and began to wipe it carefully. Perhaps it was because she had experienced too much pain during the pregnancy process that her personality had become especially sensitive and neurotic after this period. Her desire to protect the fetus in her womb had exceeded the scope of a normal mother. Her level of caution was so high that others would think that she was neurotic. After wiping it clean, Song Enya handed the white cloth back to the waiter. The waiter asked, "Do you need another cup of warm milk?" "Okay. Still no sugar?" "Yes." After placing the order, the waiter respectfully retreated. Song Enya lowered her head and leaned weakly against the sofa. Her face was pale as if she had collapsed. Yun Shirshir glanced at her and then lowered her head to play games on her phone. Since Song Enya had made an appointment with Mu Yaja, she naturally would not say anything. She was just here to accompany him. In other words, the man probably wanted to use this method to completely destroy the last bit of obsession she had for him. Mu Yaja had made up his mind to use such a cruel method to draw a clear line between him and his niece. Most likely, no woman would continue to pester her beloved man after seeing such a loving scene with his beloved wife. Unless the person was extremely thick-skinned. Still, Song Enya should belong to the latter. Otherwise, she would not have been so crazy as to use test tube babies and try to conceive his child at all costs. Mu Yaja turned his face to Song Enya, but compared to the gentleness he showed to Yun Shirshir, his expression was cold and indifferent. He asked, "Why did you ask me to come here?" Chapter 2166. He had already found out about Song Enya's pregnancy from Yun Shirshir, but he wanted her to say it herself. Since she was so shameless, he might as well completely crush her last bit of dignity. He was heartless and cruel to a person who no longer had any feelings for. Song Enya remained silent. Her face was red, and she did not know how to open her mouth in front of Yun Shirshir. Previously, she had announced to Yun Shirshir that she had a one-night stand with Brother Mu, which resulted in this child. This was just her way of sowing discord. But in reality, such a thing did not exist. She originally wanted to ask Brother Mu out alone and use both hard and soft tactics, hoping that he would take responsibility for his child and give her an explanation. She also wanted to sow discord between him and Yun Shirshir. However, in front of Yun Shirshir, she really did not know how to smooth things over. If he were to ask where the child came from, how should she answer? If Yun Shirshir was not around, she could tell him the truth. After all, she was already pregnant, and Brother Mu would not do anything to her. However, Yun Shirshir was around. Did she have to expose the lies she had told before? That would undoubtedly be slapping her own face. Seeing her conflicted look, Mu Yaja lost his patience and took a cigarette in his mouth. He did not know if he did it on purpose or not, but he lit it. As soon as he lit it, the air in the room became stuffy. After 2 puffs, the room was already filled with smoke. Song Enya's nerves flared up all of a sudden. She lifted her head only to see the man sitting opposite her puffing away. Her heart was filled with grievances, and tears gushed out of her eyes at once. "Brother Mu, can you put out the cigarette? I am pregnant." Pregnant? Mu Yaja was not in a hurry to put out the cigarette. He watched expressionlessly as she covered her mouth and nose with a wary and disgusted expression. Instead, he found it funny. "How did you get pregnant?" Song Enya was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer this question. Poor Song Enya, however, had no idea that the 2 men sitting in front of her had already figured her out. She was still trying hard to cover up the ugly things she had done, but in reality Mu Yaja had already seen through her tricks. At this moment they were treating her like a joke. Song Enya dared not take a deep breath. She covered her mouth and nose as tears streamed down her face. Choking on her tears, she confessed, "I'm pregnant with your child." "My child?" Mu Yaja laughed coldly and questioned her, "How did you get pregnant? I don't remember anything happening between us." His words were undoubtedly meant to embarrass her. However, since she had already said so, she couldn't care less about her dignity and face. Since she had already lost all faith, she might as well tell him everything. She might as well be hysterical. Chapter 2167. I'm pregnant. No matter what method I used, I'm indeed pregnant with your child. Now the child is almost 4 weeks old. I hope you'll take responsibility for this child and me. As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's face remained calm, but she sneered inwardly. This Song Enya was making herself sound so dignified. She actually wanted him to take responsibility? On what basis? She had a child for no reason and wanted to use it as a bargaining chip. Aren't you being a little too naive? Muyaja put out the cigarette in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to expose her. Instead, he remained calm and pretended to listen patiently. Seeing that he did not refute her, Song Enya felt a little more confident. She glanced at Yun Shirshir and then looked at him. I heard from this woman that you gave up the position of the head of the Mu family for her. Is that true? If that's really the case, Brother Mu, are you crazy? Looking at the entire Mu family, which one of them didn't fight to the death for this position? You actually gave up this position for her. Why did you take things so hard? Muyaja was very indifferent to her questioning. Took things so hard? You're wrong. I'm sick of it. It has nothing to do with her. Song Enya was stunned. He was defending her. He was still defending her at this time? How much did he value this? At that time, in order to seize the position of the head of the Mu family, he almost went all out and swept away 1,000 soldiers to sit in that position. How could he be so carefree now? This was not like him. In her heart, he had always been an ambitious schemer with extraordinary ability and charisma. Now he was actually using the words, "I'm sick of it," to excuse himself. If this was not protecting her, what was it? Brother Mu, what do you mean by sick of it? This woman doesn't know, but I've always seen it. How much have you sacrificed for the Mu group and Dishing Financial Group? How can you be so carefree? It must be the muse who made you choose between being the head of the family and her. Do you know the consequences of your hot-headedness? All your years of hard work have gone down the drain. Are you really willing to accept this? Willing? How could he be willing to accept this? However, he could only give up everything that belonged to Mu Group for a short period of time. Sooner or later he would take it back with interest. At this moment, the waiter pushed the door open and walked in. He placed the milk and coffee in front of the door and left. Song Enya calmed herself down for a moment before forcing a smile on her face. As if to encourage him, she told him smilingly, "The reason why the muse don't acknowledge her is that she's not worthy of you. But I'm different. My father is the mayor. You should know the status of the Song family in Beijing and the background behind them. If I'm with you relying on my mother's influence, your future will only be brighter. Perhaps the elders of the Mu family would have some misgivings about me before this. But things were different now. I'm pregnant with your child. The child in my belly is a boy. As long as I give birth to a son for you, your position will only be more stable." Mu Chichi thought to herself. At that time, who would be able to shake your position? But if you're with this woman, she'll only drag you down. Chapter 2168. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she could not hold it in any longer and retorted sarcastically, "I don't think that a woman who would use unscrupulous means to blackmail someone with a child can say such words. Song Enya, don't be too self-righteous. I won't be a burden to him. You have no right to criticize me on this." Song Enya pointed at her hysterically and said angrily, "It's not your place to lecture me." Instead of getting angry, Yun Shirshir laughed and said mockingly, "It's not your place to lecture me either, is it? I'm warning you, if you have something to say, say it. Don't make me unhappy when the time comes and kick you into miscarriage." Her domineering and ruthless words made Song Enya shudder in fear. She subconsciously covered her lower abdomen and complained tearfully, "How dare you? Do you think I wouldn't dare? Do you want me to kick you for you to see?" As Yun Shirshir said this, she clenched her fists tightly. She had wanted to do this for a long time. If it were not for the fact that the child was innocent, she would have kicked the missy when she was pestering her earlier. Song Enya narrowed her eyes and sneered. "A woman's heart is the most vicious. Let Brother Mu see your true colors." With that, she looked at Muyaja and complained, "Brother Mu, listen to this. These are the words of the woman you've been protecting all this time. You actually want to harm me and your biological child. Who said that the child in your stomach is my flesh and blood?" Muyaja suddenly said this lazily. He stretched out his arm lazily and hugged Yun Shirshir's shoulder. It was a casual gesture, but it showed that he was protecting her. Song Enya's heart sank when she saw this. However, she soon realized what Muyaja had said earlier and shuddered. She immediately retorted righteously, "Brother Mu, don't you believe what I said? If you don't believe me, we can do a paternity test." "Song Enya, do you really think that you can get pregnant with my child without my knowledge through artificial insemination?" Muyaja interrupted her coldly. His words were filled with mockery and contempt. Song Enya was stunned. "Brother Mu, what do you mean by that?" Muyaja took a sip of coffee and smiled, but his tone was so cold that it was almost cruel. I think you probably bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank so that you could get what you wanted. In order to achieve his goal, he was willing to do whatever it took. However, I'm sorry to inform you that while you were preparing for pregnancy, I've already sent someone to make a swap. Hence you're carrying Mu Yanqing's child now. Her words had, without a doubt, mercilessly nailed the Missy to a bloody cross. She widened her eyes in disbelief as she stared at his handsome face with a ferocious and unfocused gaze. Her mouth was wide open, but she could not utter a word for a long time. After a long futile effort, she finally squeezed out 3 words. Impossible. Ha! Impossible. Impossible. She had meticulously planned this plan. To ensure that nothing would go wrong, she went through with the IVF surgery. Now, he was telling her that the sperm had been swapped and that the child in her stomach was actually Mu Yanqing's. How could this be? Chapter 2169. Song Enya's body swayed. She felt as if the world had turned dark, as if doomsday had arrived. She wanted to cry but she could not. Her mouth was wide open. Her shocked and dazed expression made her look as comical as a clown's, yet it was also filled with destructive despair. She clenched her fists, trembling. Almost hysterically she cried out, "Impossible! It's impossible. I made sure that it was yours. That's why I went through with the operation. How could you have the chance to swap it? How could he have detected her actions? She had clearly done a very thorough job of keeping it a secret. How did he find out? Impossible?" Muyaja's lips curled into a nonchalant smile as he lazily leaned back on the sofa, enjoying her despairing look. There was no sign of love on his face. Instead, it was a bone-deep disgust. "What kind of confidence do you have to think that you can hide from me and do such a despicable thing behind my back? Song Enya, it's time for you to wake up. If you continue to be so stubborn, you'll only make me hate you." The loathing in his eyes stung her in an instant. Song Enya stared at his piercing gaze. She felt as if all her bones had been smashed into smithereens. As if she had lost her mind, she kept muttering, "Impossible. Impossible." This man always had this kind of ability. With just a few words, he could beat her until she was riddled with scars and dripping with blood. "But, thank you for reminding me that there was still a hidden danger. So, while you were undergoing the artificial insemination, I sent Minyu to personally supervise you and order someone to destroy the evidence." With that, he coldly curled his lips into a nonchalant and elegant smile. "Isn't it time for you to wake up from your dream?" Song Enya bit her lower lip hard as she broke down and cried out loud. She was not just awake, she was already in pieces. How could this be? How could this be? The plan she had planned for so long was actually shattered by him so easily. In an instant, she fell from a high place to the bottom of the valley and was smashed to pieces. In a daze, she raised her head and saw Yun Shishir's calm face. From the beginning to the end, she was so elegant and calm, as if she did not care about such a conversation. That's right. Right now, she was like a high and mighty princess who was doted on by Brother Mu. Brother Mu gave his all to build a tall castle for her to protect her in. No matter what she did, she would not be able to hurt her in the slightest. How much did she yearn for such doting? She also wanted to be a carefree princess and enjoy the love of her beloved man, but, "Isn't it time for you to wake up from your dream?" Muyaja's cold words were still ringing in his ears. Song Enya seemed to have gone mad all of a sudden as she stared fixedly into his eyes. Holding on to her last shred of hope, she demanded aggressively, "Brother Mu, I don't want you to take responsibility anymore. I really don't want you to take responsibility anymore. So, please tell me. Don't be so cruel. Tell me that the child in my stomach is yours, right? Is it because you hate him and want me to get rid of him that you said those words?" What he said just now was just to provoke her so that she would abort the child on her own accord. "Is that so?" Muyaja said coldly, "Stop joking." Chapter 2170. Stop joking. These 5 simple words once again plunged her into a state of despair. Song Enya slumped into the chair, her body on the verge of collapsing. She no longer had the strength to speak. Tears streamed down her face as she cried helplessly. "Boo-hoo. Why are you treating me so cruelly? I just want to be with you, even if it's in a lowly way. What did I do wrong?" Muyaja lit another cigarette and casually picked up the phone. Yun Shishir glanced at him and suddenly felt that this man was really two-faced. There was a pregnant woman sitting in front of him, but he casually picked up a cigarette, lit it and started smoking again. Actually, she had never seen him smoke so much. Was he doing it on purpose? He always had this kind of ability to disgust the people he hated a little. After all, she was not his woman, and the child in Song Enya's stomach was not his child. Naturally, there was no need for him to have any scruples. If it were Yun Shirshir who was pregnant at this moment, not to mention him smoking, even if a stranger were to smoke next to him, given this domineering man's usual style, he would definitely kick the stranger away and ask him to scram. At this thought, Yun Shirshir was amused by her own imagination. What was this called? Protecting his calf? On second thought, what was this about protecting his calf? She wasn't his little calf. At most, this was called protecting his wife. What nonsense was this about protecting his calf? Just as Yun Shirshir was letting her imagination run wild, Mu Yaja had already dialed Jiang Qiming's number. He had long expected that Song Enya would look for him as soon as she returned to the country. At this moment, the Song family probably did not know that she had returned to the capital. He was looking forward to seeing how angry Song Jingwa's stern face would be if the Song family found out that such a reckless daughter had appeared in the family. It would most likely be bruised for a few days. At this time it was already very late. Jiang Qiming had gone to bed early, but there was no news of Song Enya. She did not sleep well, and in just over a month she looked much more haggard. Song Yunshi comforted her and told her to rest early and recuperate, but she couldn't sleep well. Half asleep, she was jolted awake by her ringtone. Thinking that it was a call from her niece, she quickly picked up the call, but the moment the call connected, she heard Mu Yaja's voice on the other end. "Sis Enya is back." He had always been concise and to the point. There was almost no small talk and he went straight to the point. Jiang Qiming snapped out of her daze at once. The moment she heard that her niece had returned to the capital, she was overwhelmed with excitement and immediately asked, "Where's Enya? Can you put her on the phone?" "I'm afraid not now." "Why?" Mu Yaja glanced at Song Enya, who was sitting opposite him in a daze and crying. She was not in the mood to answer the call, so he said, "Something happened to her. You'd better bring your family over to deal with it." "What? Your good daughter has created a mess for you. Without your husband's help, I'm afraid this matter can't be resolved, right?" "Your husband." This distant form of address left Jiang Qiming dumbfounded, and she was immediately confused. "What's going on?" "Your daughter is pregnant." Chapter 2171. Mu Yaja hung up the call expressionlessly after a burst of ear-piercing noise and sent the address over. More than half an hour later, the Song family arrived in 3 cars. It was so grand and mighty that even official vehicles were used. Seeing that more people had arrived, the waitress opened the door with a bitter look. Just as she was about to politely say that she would not be serving them anymore, she saw a familiar middle-aged man walking in. She did not recognize him at first glance. After being stunned for a few seconds, she politely said, "Sir, our shop is closed." Halfway through her words, she was immediately pulled away by the store manager. She did not recognize him, but the store manager did. "Isn't this man the capital's mayor? What kind of wind blew such a big shot here?" As soon as Song Jinghua stepped into the store, he waved his hand, and the bodyguards behind him walked into the store in an orderly manner. Then, as if they were chasing away flies, all the employees, including the store manager, were chased out of the store. Everyone complained incessantly. They were wearing flimsy uniforms. The weather outside was a few degrees below zero. The few of them hugged their bodies and shivered. However, when they glanced at the car used by the Zheng residents parked at the side, they immediately swallowed their anger and did not dare to say anything. It. Today was the worst day of their lives. They had offended someone they should not have offended. They had worked so hard to run a business, yet they still had to worry about offending someone. After clearing the place, Song Jinghua and Song Yunshi led Jiang Qiming to the private room. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Song Enya sitting at the table in a daze. It was as if she had suffered a huge blow and her soul had left her body. Jiang Qiming was about to go up to her when she was stopped by her father. "Stand aside." He was already a little grumpy after being disturbed in the middle of the night. When he saw that this woman still wanted to protect his daughter at this time, his tone naturally turned bad. The man walked straight toward the missy and stopped in his tracks. Without calling out her name, he grabbed her by the collar and gave her a tight slap across her face. Smack! A thunderous sound was heard. So much so that the small box was filled with the resounding echo of the slap. Song Enya, who had been slapped to the sofa, sat up with a numb look on her face and raised her head. When Jiang Qiming saw this, her heart was broken, but she didn't dare to say anything. She just stood to the side worried. Song Enya, who had been crying so hard for a long time that her throat was hoarse, finally knew to stop. However, even though she had stopped crying, she was still in a daze. Even when Song Jinghua walked in with his men, she did not notice. She still sat there in a daze without any reaction. However, after being slapped by Song Jinghua, her eyes were slightly dazed and she couldn't react for a moment. She got up from the sofa and felt a burning pain on her face. Her entire head was shaking. It wasn't until her line of sight regained its focus that she realized that Song Jinghua had come. She then realized who had slapped Rayleigh just now. Chapter 2172. You're such a disgrace. What's going on? Song Jinghua was exasperated and wanted to slap her a few more times. One slap was not enough to appease his anger, but looking at her, he pitied her. However, on second thought, Jiang Qiming said that she had returned to the capital, but she was carrying a child in her stomach. How could an unmarried girl from a prestigious family get pregnant before marriage? Most importantly, they still didn't know whose child this child belonged to. He did not know what this bastard daughter was thinking. She went missing for no reason and came back pregnant. Did she think that his life was not short enough and wanted to anger him to death? He was the mayor. Although he doted on his children, he had always been strict in educating them. If such a thing were to spread, not only would it be offensive to public morals, but it would also affect his status. He was going to run for re-election next year, and he was aiming for a high position. Now she had inexplicably caused him to lose his life. How could he smooth things over? Song Yunshi did not dare to interrupt, but Jiang Qiming could not help but feel sorry for her daughter when she saw that the situation was getting out of hand. Jinghua, let's talk this out, she said in an exasperated tone. Shut up. Song Jinghua was already filled with anger, and Jiang Qiming's recklessness was undoubtedly an act of ignorance. He turned around and did not care that there were outsiders present. He reprimanded her fiercely, if you keep talking, I'll teach you a lesson too. You even said, let's talk things over. If you hadn't spoiled her and let her do whatever she wanted, would she have done such a ridiculous thing? Jiang Qiming's eyes reddened at his words. She was already worried to begin with, and now that she was reprimanded in front of outsiders, she felt that she had lost all face. She covered her face sadly and turned to the side. When Song Yunshi saw this, she also blamed Jiang Qiming for being nosy. Seeing that her daughter was being reprimanded by Song Jinghua, she felt sorry for her and immediately comforted her in a low voice. Mom, we're outside. You're a woman, so don't interrupt. You have to give Dad face. Don't interrupt what your father is saying. What's the matter? Can't we talk at home? Aren't you making things difficult for Dad? When Jiang Qiming heard this, she could only suppress the grievance and sadness in her heart. She nodded helplessly, but her eyes were wet. When Song Enya saw how angry her father was, she cried even louder in fear and trepidation. She had always been in awe of Song Jinghua. This father of hers was usually gentle, but once he got angry he was extremely terrifying. What right do you have to cry here? Tell me, how did the child in your stomach come to be? At such a young age she didn't have any self-respect at all. She was pregnant and all she knew was to cry when she came back? Now you look so pitiful. What were you doing before? Song Enya's eyes became even more swollen after the stern reprimand. From the beginning to the end, Song Jinghua did not even look Mu Yaja in the eye. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. Was this Song Jinghua very powerful? When he was still the heir of the Mu family, whenever he saw him, no matter how big the matter was, he would always greet him warmly. Chapter 2173. Mu Yaja was not a pushover. Since Song Jinghua was so harsh, he could not be bothered to smooth things over for him. In front of everyone he said in an extremely humiliating tone, I don't know what's wrong with your daughter. She stole my sperm from a sperm bank and secretly ran overseas to undergo IVF. She got pregnant with a child. Song Jinghua's eyes widened when he heard this. What? Jiang Qiming, who was standing at the side, also widened her eyes in disbelief. Song Yunshi, on the other hand, glared at his niece in surprise. What? This girl actually did such a thing? She stole someone else's sperm and ran overseas to undergo IVF. Is she crazy? Belatedly, Song Yunshi suddenly realized that when Song Enya went missing earlier, a sum of money had disappeared from his account. The 8-figure sum of money was not allowed to be used. It was left in his hands by his father to manage. Could she have taken this sum of money and used it to do such a ridiculous thing? Bribing a sperm bank and a prostitute, then running overseas to undergo IVF. She must have been possessed by a demon? Song Yunshi bit her lip. At this point, his father had not noticed this matter, so he did not mention it. His father had never asked about this sum of money, but now he did not dare to say it. If he said that this sum of money had been used by Song Enya, his father would be so angry that he would cripple her. If that happened, Song Enya and the child in her stomach would not be able to keep their lives. At this thought, Song Yunshi broke out in a cold sweat. She could not help but feel worried for Song Enya. Song Enya covered her face in a daze as she sobbed. The side of her ear that had been hit was buzzing, so she could not hear anything at all. She could only vaguely see Song Jinghua's increasingly angry face, which was terrifying to the extreme. IVF. She probably wanted to steal my sperm and get pregnant with my child so that she could blackmail me into marrying her. She stole the wrong sperm, so I didn't manage to conceive a child. Instead, I got pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child. Mu Yaja used the harshest words to humiliate Song Jinghua. Song Jinghua's body swayed and his face almost fell. His gaze was gloomy and his expression was complicated. Then he clenched his fists. Impossible. To protect his reputation, he denied it and vowed, although my daughter is often muddle-headed, she wouldn't do such a ridiculous thing. Whether he did it or not, won't it be clear when we go home and ask? Mu Yaja sneered again. She knew that I had stepped down as the patriarch, but she still came to me. Not only did she twist words and force logic, but she also confidently asked my wife to abdicate her position. She even asked me to marry her and return to the Mu family to continue to wield the power. She even said that she would use all the power of her mother's family to support me. How ridiculous. Brother Mu. Song Enya could not listen to it anymore. She covered her ears and screamed. It was extremely ear-piercing. With tears in her eyes, she begged pitifully, "Stop talking. Stop talking. Just take it that he took pity on her and did not force her into a corner. Alright, I won't talk about it anymore. However, don't blame me for this. Even if the child in your stomach is mine, I will never acknowledge it. I won't acknowledge my child just because it's someone else's child." These words were undoubtedly the last bit of Song Jinghua's face. Chapter 2174. Song Jinghua sucked in a deep breath of cold air. After contemplating the cold expression on Mu Yaja's face for a long time, he suppressed his indignation and finally spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Hearing Mu Yaja's frosty reply, Song Jinghua had nowhere to vent his anger. This lad can't possibly be lying. Still, no matter what, he found it hard to believe that his precious daughter would actually say such disgraceful words. Using her maternal family's influence? Supporting Mu Yaja in his bid to become the family head again? Using her warm face to stick to his cold butt? As a result, his status as the mayor of the city had been degraded. This woman had been doted on and protected since she was young, but in the end she was blinded by so-called love when she grew up. Besides, was Mu Yaja someone she should love? She was so blinded by her so-called incestuous love that she sided with an outsider and wanted to use her family's influence at all costs to help Mu Yaja make a comeback. The point was, did he care? He did not even care. It was not as if Song Jinghua had not arranged a marriage for his daughter before. What kind of high official and noble family could not find a match for a madwoman like her? Alas, she did not want any of them and wanted to wholeheartedly revolve around an iceberg. This foolish daughter of his, did she not realize that she was like a moth flying toward a flame? He really wanted to wake her up with a loud scolding and let her see how ruthless the man she loved was to her. In front of so many people, he did not care about her dignity at all and made her lose face as well. The more Song Jinghua thought about it, the more infuriated he felt. He really wanted to slap his niece a few more times, but when he saw her bleak and dejected expression as well as her eyes staring blankly at her knees, he could not help but feel that she was extremely pitiful. He could not bear to see her like this, so he swallowed the vicious words that were about to come out of his mouth. Forget it. He suppressed his displeasure, but he still had to maintain his poise and bearing. Hence, he waved his hand and ordered, "Let's go home." Song Enya's eyes widened when she heard her father instructing, "Yunshi, help your sister into the car and go home." Upon hearing this, Song Enya burst into tears again. Song Jinghua immediately scolded, "What are you crying for?" "I'm too ashamed to go back." She shook her head in despair and sorrow. For the sake of this plan, she had put in all her effort and even sacrificed her family's interests, all for a petty and far-fetched reason to stay by his side. It didn't matter if he couldn't see the light as long as he could stay by her side. But now she had seen Mu Yaja's attitude towards her with her own eyes. It could be said that she had completely given up. He had completely given up on Chu Yang. Originally she was unwilling to give up on this man. She had tried her best to get closer to him again and again, but now she realized that everything she had done was in vain. At this moment she no longer had any thoughts about him. The moth threw itself into the fire without hesitation and was burned to ashes in the end, dying a tragic death. And now wasn't she just like that moth, burned and scarred by the raging flames? She no longer had the face to return to that home. I can't go back. Everything can't go back. The past with Brother Mu and everything with the Song family can't go back. Chapter 2175. Song Enya's mental breakdown broke Jiang Qiming's heart. She walked up to her and hugged her daughter as tears streamed down her cheeks. Mom doesn't blame you. It's Mom's fault, it's Mom's fault. If I hadn't spoiled you so much, you wouldn't have done such a foolish thing. It's the father's fault for not teaching you well. It's not your fault that I didn't teach you well. Her words were deliberately meant for Song Jinghua. The reason why she said this was mainly because she did not want him to put all the blame on Song Enya. She was already covered in scars this time. If she were to return home and suffer another blow, she was really afraid that she would lose her daughter forever. As a mother, how could she not see her daughter's current state? She was broken down, hopeless, and wandering on the edge of darkness. If she were to return home, even if Song Jinghua were to say something harsh, it would be the straw that broke her back. There was another hidden meaning in her words, and it was for Song Jinghua's benefit. If not for him doting on Song Enya so much when she was young, she wouldn't be so childish and immature. Song Jinghua's face turned red instantly. He muttered a few words but did not say anything harsh. What nonsense are you saying? If you don't go home, where else can you go? Go back. Song Jinghua paused and sighed helplessly. Dad doesn't blame you anymore. As he said this, he reached out his large palm and gently patted Song Enya's head as a form of consolation. Song Enya started bawling her eyes out like a spoiled child. At the entrance of the cafe, after Song Yunxi and Jiang Qiming helped Song Enya into the car, Song Jinghua paid the bill and politely apologized to the waiters and thanked them. Mu Yazha and Yun Shishir were about to leave when Song Jinghua called out to him. Yazha. Mu Yazha turned around and saw Song Jinghua looking at him with a serious face. He said slowly, I have something to talk to you about. As he said this, he glanced at Yun Shishir as a form of avoidance. Mu Yazha's lips curled into a smile as he turned to look at Yun Shishir. Wait for me in the car, okay? Good. I will wait for you. Yun Shishir took the car keys and got in the car without consulting anyone. Song Jinghua got into another car with him. As soon as the door was closed, Mu Yazha's face turned cold. She didn't even need to think about what she wanted to say to him behind closed doors. Dirty linen should not be aired in public. Song Jinghua, this sanctimonious but cunning old man, must want to discuss some conditions with him. Song Jinghua sized him up a few times but he was secretly shocked. As for this kid, he was extremely shocked when he heard the news of his resignation the night before yesterday. This was too sudden. What was even more unexpected was that this kid, who had always been a black-bellied ambitious person, actually took the initiative to give up the position of the Mujia's patriarch. He really could not figure it out. However, at this moment, he looked at the man in front of him, who was leisurely leaning against the window with a cold expression. Even if he was no longer the glorious head of the family, it could not diminish the emperor's aura that he constantly exuded. Song Jinghua said slowly, I heard that you resigned from the position of the family head. Heard? Chapter 2176. Song Jinghua must have found out that he was no longer the head of the Mu family. However, what he did not find out was, even if he had left the Mu family, it was only temporary. Song Jinghua was stunned. Since Mu Yazha had taken the initiative to shed all pretense of cordiality, he did not bother with pleasantries and went straight to the point. My daughter's situation this time is all thanks to you. However, I'm a reasonable person. She only has herself to blame for ending up in such a state. On account of your sibling relationship with Jiang Qiming, I won't pursue this matter with you. In other words, he was implying that he and Song Enya were equally responsible for this matter after leaving the Mu family and falling into dire straits. On account of their relationship, he would not take nothing from him. His words and attitude were all high and mighty. However, Mu Yazha did not fall for it. He sneered and said, Song Jinghua, don't think that I'm a pitiful worm that can be trampled on by anyone just because I'm no longer the head of the Mu family. The Mu family has been in power for so long, and the power in its hands is definitely not the same as the Mu family's. The fact that I'm able to reach such a stage and now that I'm giving it all up, it can only mean that I don't care about all of this. To put it bluntly, I don't need you to deliberately show mercy and show mercy. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't put yourself on such a high pedestal. I'm not the one who caused your daughter to end up like this. To put it bluntly, your daughter's current state is troubling me. When Enya was young, I used to think that she was obedient and lovely, but now, she makes me feel disgusted and disgusted. His words gave Song Jinghua a wake-up call. How could that be? Even if Mu Yaja was no longer the head of the Mu family, he was definitely not a pitiful worm that could be trampled on by others. After all, he had offended many enemies when he was still in power. If he did not have absolute confidence, he would not have stepped down from his position and put himself in a passive position. This could only mean that this fellow still had a few trump cards that he had yet to play. At this thought, Song Jinggua's arrogance and haughtiness finally subsided a little. He nodded and smiled. All right. It's my fault. I was too harsh with my words. Mu Yaja coldly snorted, his expression arrogant. When Song Jinghua saw this, he couldn't help but be glad that he had 2 holes in his nostrils. If he didn't have these 2 holes, he would definitely be angered to the point of hypoxia. He gritted his teeth and suppressed his urge. Suddenly he made a request. Yaja, there's something you must promise me. No matter what Enya has done to bother you, I will definitely keep an eye on her in the future and never let her do such foolish things again. However, regarding today's matter, as the saying goes, don't wash your dirty linen in public. Enya got pregnant out of wedlock and secretly went abroad for artificial insemination. Keep it a secret for now and don't spread the news. Until I come up with a plan, I hope you will keep your mouth shut. Oh. Mu Yaja had long expected such a request from him. Song Jinghua was a man who cared a lot about his reputation. Given his niece's behavior, it was nothing more than a disgrace to the family's reputation. If she alarmed that powerful old man in the Song family, he would most likely chase her out in a fit of rage. Chapter 2177. Although Song Jinghua scolded Song Enya harshly on the surface, deep down he was still concerned about his daughter's reputation. Perhaps he was more concerned about his own reputation. You want me to keep your secret? He nodded guiltily. Sure, but I have a condition. A condition? Song Jinghua's face lit up with joy. It was naturally a good thing that he was willing to raise a condition. He was just afraid that his attitude would be firm and leave no room for negotiation. If he raised a condition, there would naturally be room for negotiation. Fine. Tell me, what is it? If you ask someone to keep a secret, you'll have to pay hush money, right? What do you think of 10 million yuan? Mu Yaja could always think of an extreme way to disgust others. Song Jinghua was so disgusted that his eyeballs almost popped out. 10 million yuan? Where was he going to get such a sum of money? Although he was in a high position and had trusted aides around him in business, he could not have any assets under his name, but there were people in his family who took resources from him to invest. However, he really did not know where he could get 10 million yuan in such a short time. Although he was not as incorruptible as everyone praised him, he was definitely not that corrupt to the point where he could casually take out so much money. So much money? He sighed with a conflicted expression. You can't afford it? Mu Yaja smiled, knowing that he could not afford it. It's fine. If you can't afford 10 million yuan, you can use something else. What do you mean? I heard that the land in Xincheng will be auctioned off by you soon. Song Jinghua's face froze when he heard Mu Yaja's words. Where did he find out about such a confidential matter? While he was still in a daze, Mu Yaja made an exorbitant demand. You should have the right to decide the ownership of that land before the auction. Therefore, I want that piece of land. As soon as he finished speaking, Song Jinghua immediately rejected, impossible. Once this resort was completed, it would mean that it would be a project with considerable profits. He did indeed have the right to decide the ownership of this piece of land, but at the moment, even though there was no investment, once this piece of land was auctioned, it would be as high as a few hundred million. That would be more than 10 million. Mu Yaja directly asked him for this piece of land. This was undoubtedly cutting off his flesh. Song Jinghua gritted his teeth and looked at him as if he was looking at a devil. He resolutely refused. I can't let you have this land. You want 10 million? Sure. Give me a month and I'll give it to you. 1 month. I can't wait any longer. Either you give me 10 million now or you give me that piece of land. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Mu Yaja suddenly smiled deeply. If you don't tell me, how would I not know? I still have some things that you might be interested in. If you are willing to part with it, I will give you face. Something that he was interested in? Song Jinghua stood rooted to the ground. Could it be the evidence of those unspeakable things that he had done? Once he thought of this, he started to feel uneasy. This fellow, how could he be so shrewd? He had actually managed to get his hands on the evidence of his crimes without anyone noticing. Furthermore, he was holding it tightly in his hands. Now, wasn't this his biggest bargaining chip? Chapter 2178. Ah, but I knew you'd reject it. Forget it, this deal doesn't count. Mu Yaja suddenly added, although I'm no longer the head of the Mu family, I still have Huan Yu shares in my hands. It's not a problem for me to create a press release overnight. The mayor's daughter went against ethics and got pregnant before marriage. Is this headline enough? That one sentence was enough to make Song Jinghua shudder in fear. Mu Yaja smiled wickedly and pretended to get up. Song Jinghua immediately grabbed him. You can't do that. Do you have the heart to destroy Enya with your own hands? Mu Yaja asked calmly, what's there to not have the heart to do? The corners of Song Jinghua's eyes twitched fiercely. Looking at his disdainful expression, he was about to explode. However, when he turned his head and saw his disappointing daughter sitting in the other car, he suppressed the displeasure in his heart and asked patiently, when do you want it? Tomorrow. It's too rushed. I might not be able to make it. Mu Yaja smiled coldly. My patience is limited. I'll only give you 3 days. Either give me $10 million or transfer the ownership of that land under my name. After that, he waved Song Jinghua's hand away expressionlessly and got out of the car. Song Jinghua was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He felt as if his flesh was being sliced apart by this fellow. In just a few minutes, a few $100 million worth of land was in his pocket. How could he not be angry? On the way back, Yun Shishir asked curiously why Song Jinghua had called him over. Mu Yaja told her everything about their conversation. Yun Shishir was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Isn't this blackmail? She spat out, flabbergasted. Mu Yaja argued, I got this land based on my own abilities. It has nothing to do with blackmail. Yun Shishir stuck out her tongue. It would be strange if it wasn't blackmail. However, Mu Yaja was also capable. He targeted Song Jinghua's weakness. If the scandal of Song Enya's premarital pregnancy was exposed, it would have a deep impact on Song Jinghua's future. On one hand, it was a project worth hundreds of millions. On the other hand, it was his more than 10 years of career. After thinking about it, Song Jinghua naturally knew how to weigh the pros and cons and could only compromise. Although this was only one step of compromise, this deal was a huge loss. Regardless of whether Song Jinghua gave him 10 million yuan in the end or gave him that piece of land, it would be a solution to his desperate situation. Now, the Xinyu Financial Group was short of funds. Without capital investment, many projects had stopped operating, and the company was losing money every minute. Perhaps Mu Yaja did not care about such a small loss. But if they stagnated, they would only grow. That was why he did not stop Song Enya from going overseas for IVF. He wanted to have a backup plan in case of an emergency. Yun Shishir's mouth twitched. This man was far more scheming than she had imagined. To think that he had already prepared a contingency plan and leeway for the future predicament so long ago. It could only be said that this man's ambition had always been unimaginable. Thinking about it, Song Jinghua must be feeling very depressed on his way home, right? Chapter 2179. Yun Shishir suddenly found it rather interesting. She did not expect that after going around in circles, he would actually gain a lot of benefits from it. Sometimes this man was quite evil. When he pampered someone, he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, if he hardened his heart to trick someone, that person would probably lose all their temper. On the other end in the car, Song Yunshi, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, kept her head lowered and tactfully kept quiet. In the back seat, Jiang Qiming hugged her daughter tenderly and kept comforting her back. Song Jinghua, who was sitting beside her, was so angry that his face was ashen. His pair of fierce and sharp eyes stared straight ahead, and his whole person exuded an aura of an impending storm. The temporary silence in the car was more like the calm before the storm. Jiang Qiming carefully glanced at Song Jinghua's side profile. In fact, she really wanted to know what the two of them were talking about that caused Song Jinghua's expression to be so unsightly. However, due to his unsightly expression, she could not muster up the courage to ask. However, after a long silence, she finally could not hold it in any more. After weighing the pros and cons, she cautiously asked, "What did you and Yaja talk about? You're not allowed to mention that jerk's name in front of me again." Song Jinghua interrupted her in a thunderous rage. Jiang Qiming was shocked by his terrifying tone. She stared at him with widened eyes, seemingly unable to understand where his anger came from. However, seeing how angry he was, she did not dare to pursue the matter and tactfully kept her mouth shut. However, just because she did not ask, it did not mean that he would not talk about it anymore. He was full of anger and could not find a place to vent it. Her question naturally gave him an opportunity to vent. She saw him turn his flushed face abruptly, stared into her eyes and roared furiously, "That good brother of yours is really arrogant. I tried my best to persuade him to keep his mouth shut about Enya's matter on account of our family's many years of friendship. Guess what he said though? Jiang Qiming shook her head blankly and asked in surprise, "What did he say?" At the mention of Mu Yaja, Song Enya, who was originally in a daze, finally regained some vitality. Her empty eyes also regained some focus. Song Yunshi, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, also pricked up her ears curiously. He said that if you want him to keep the secret, you have to give him a sum of hush money. The moment Song Jinghua finished speaking, Jiang Qiming shook her head in disbelief. Impossible. Yaja is never that kind of person. Ah, you underestimate him too much. Now, he's no longer the Mujia's lord, he's relieved of his heavy responsibility. What's the difference between him and a waste? Now, because of your disappointing daughter, he has a chance to make a fuss. What did he say? He said he wanted me to give him 10 million. Otherwise, he would use the media outlets under him to publicize this matter. He really had a good plan. I have no choice but to give you the money. But he was really capable of saying 10 million. Don't you think that this kid is asking for too much? Chapter 2180. How can we come up with 10 million yuan in such a short time? Jiang Qiming muttered anxiously. At the same time, she was extremely disappointed in Mu Yaja. How could this brat make such a shocking request? 10 million yuan. Even Song Yunshi was dumbfounded. Song Enya, on the other hand, could not help but shudder when she heard this. Why did Brother Mu suddenly become so ruthless? Could it be that he really did not have any leeway for her? 10 million yuan, she suddenly felt suffocated. Before she left the country, she had secretly transferred a sum of money from Song Yunshi's bank account. That sum of money was still empty like a black hole. If she had not done such a foolish thing, she would still be able to fork out 10 million yuan. However, if she had not staked everything on this one throw and allowed that man to take advantage of her, the entire Song family would not be in such a passive state now. Does Dad know about this? Song Enya's face turned ashen. She was worried that if her father found out that she had moved this sum of money and squandered it all for the sake of IVF, would he be so angry that he would strangle her to death? At the thought of this, Song Enya trembled in fear. Jiang Qiming's mind was full of this matter, so she did not notice her daughter's abnormality for a while. She only comforted her. "Jinghua, don't worry. I'll talk to him later. On account of our sibling relationship, he won't be so ruthless." "Forget it." Song Jinghua snorted disdainfully. "He has nothing now. What are you talking to him about? Sibling relationship? I think this lad has already fallen into the devil's path. He doesn't want to be the family head and actually gives up everything for a woman. Now, you're still hoping that he will acknowledge you as his sister. He doesn't care about his family now. If you talk to him, you'll only fall into his trap." After a pause, he snorted coldly with a gloomy gaze. "We can choose not to give him the 10 million yuan, but he has another condition. I have a piece of golden land in my hands now, and he wants me to use my authority to give it to him for free." When Song Yunshi heard this, she immediately asked nervously, "Is it the land in the new city?" Song Jinghua pulled a long face and didn't say anything. Song Yunshi's heart skipped a beat. Seeing that her father didn't reject it immediately, she thought that Mu Yaja must have made such a request. Tears streamed down Song Enya's face at once. She knew very well that if her father were to give this piece of land to Brother Mu for free, it would not be a matter of 10 million yuan. This piece of land was priceless. It would bring about a series of unprecedented economic benefits, and the far-reaching impact of this bidding case on his father's position was immeasurable. If everything went smoothly, it would be an unimaginable help to her father in the future. Song Yunshi asked worriedly, "Dad, are you really going to cede this land to him? What else can we do? Could it be that he could only watch as the Song family scandal was blown all over the city by this brat? I can't afford to lose face, and neither can the Song family. Your grandfather is already old, so he can't afford to lose face." Mu Yaja knew how to grasp a person's weakness. Chapter 2181. Song Jinghua suddenly closed his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. However, he suddenly thought of something and opened his eyelids. He looked at Song Yunshi with bright eyes and asked, "Didn't I ask you to temporarily keep a bank account for me?" Before he could finish his words, Song Yunshi's mind went blank with a bang. Even Song Enya's face turned ghastly pale at once. Song Jinghua did not notice the tacit change on the siblings' faces at all. He was focused on investigating the money in the bank account. He recalled for a moment and said in a deep voice, "I remember that there's more than 20 million in that account." Like a drowning man adrift at sea, he leaned forward and asked covetously, "Hurry up and write a check tomorrow. Do it early in the morning." "Dad?" Song Yunshi lowered her head with a pale face, not daring to make a sound. Her conflicted expression seemed to indicate that she was feeling extremely guilty and wanted to hide something in a hurry, but she could not say a word for a long time. Song Enya sized up Song Yunshi and furrowed her brows worriedly. However, she gripped her skirt uneasily and bit her red lips tightly. She bit so hard that her originally pale lips were filled with blood, as if they were about to bleed. Song Jinghua, on the other hand, was extremely sharp. He could tell at a glance that Song Yunshi seemed to be feeling guilty about something and could not help but be a little suspicious. Where did that money go? Don't tell me that I asked you to keep it and you squandered it on your own. Song Jinghua could not help but suspect in this direction. His voice became increasingly gloomy and sharp, and there was a sense of suffocation in it. Song Yunshi clenched her fists but did not say a word. He had been carefully managing this account, but the only oversight was fatal. He had guarded against everyone but not the mole. Song Enya, on the other hand, was the mole in the family. Song Enya sized up Song Yunshi's conflicted expression. She knew that Yunshi was protecting her and was unwilling to betray her. Therefore, just as Song Jinghua was about to fly into a rage, she suddenly raised her head without hesitation and grabbed his arm. She made up her mind and confessed through gritted teeth, It's me." Song Jinghua was stunned for a moment before he exclaimed in unison, "What? I misappropriated that sum of money." Song Enya broke down and yelled loudly. She hugged her head tightly, almost desperately revealing the truth. "I want to carry out my plan, so I need a sum of money. Artificial insemination requires a lot of capital. Plus, to get those things we need to sacrifice a lot of money. So I came up with the idea of money. I originally thought that this plan was foolproof and that I could fill in the gap very quickly. But I miscalculated." Her words were enough to plunge Song Jinghua into an incomparably dark state. He felt the world spinning around him. When he came back to his senses, he shouted in disbelief, "Song Enya, are you crazy?" His thunderous voice even frightened the driver. His wrist trembled and he almost lost control of the car. Chapter 2182. Song Jinghua was enraged. "How dare you? How dare you embezzle that sum of money? Don't you know that it's the Gong funds?" That tears streamed down Song Enya's face as she begged in regret. "It's all my fault. I know my mistake now. If you hate me, you can scold me or hit me. I'll have no regrets even if you beat me to death. Anyway, I don't want to live anymore. I've humiliated you, Mommy, and the entire family. Why don't you strangle me to death? I know I'm wrong, sob sob sob." She started bawling her eyes out. Song Jinghua gritted his teeth in anger. Seeing his niece in such a state, he really raised his hand high to slap her. Jiang Qiming was quick to react. She shielded her daughter in her arms and stopped her in time. She broke down and said, "Jinghua, calm down. Calm down." "How can I calm down? To have such an unfilial daughter, I can't. What's done is done. There's no point in saying all this. Enya already knows her mistake. I believe that she really knows her mistake and won't do such a foolish thing again. Just this once, give her one last chance, okay?" She pleaded bitterly as she hugged her daughter tightly and curled up into a ball. Song Jinghua looked at them in a daze. Suddenly, he sneered and spat out a few words with trembling lips. "Great. You two are connected by heart. You've made me inhumane, haven't you?" Jiang Qiming was so frightened that she dared not speak. With trembling hands, Song Jinghua fished out a pack of cigarettes. Just as he was about to light one up and take a few puffs to relieve his anger, he glanced at the pair of mother and daughter, who were huddled together pitifully. At the thought of Song Enya, who was not even a month old yet, he suddenly felt frustrated and threw the pack of cigarettes away. With a loud smack, the pack of cigarettes hit the windshield and slid down the dashboard before falling to the ground. Song Jinghua covered his face in despair and lowered his body. His voice was hoarse. "Enya, you will kill Daddy like this, do you know that?" Jiang Qiming was completely stunned. Song Yunshi was also stunned. All along, her father had been indomitable and high-spirited in front of them. But now, because of Song Enya, he actually broke down and shed tears in front of them for the first time in his life. Song Enya was so scared that she did not even dare to breathe when she saw this. She felt that she had caused her father to suffer, but now that she was a sinner, there was no way she could comfort him. She could only shrink to one side. Song Yunshi's heart ached for herself and her father's heart. At the same time, her hatred for Mu Yaja deepened. Could be said that the deeper the love was, the deeper the hatred was. Her love for Mu Yaja had turned into bone-deep hatred at this moment. She hugged her shoulders and cried out in pain and helplessness, "Dad, I'm sorry. I really know I was wrong. I'll listen to whatever you say in the future. She did not ask for Song Jinghua's forgiveness. She only hoped that she would not implicate her father no matter what the price was. Song Jinghua did not make a sound as tears fell silently. He did not say a word along the way. It was obvious that his heart was heavy, so Jiang Qiming did not dare to disturb him. Chapter 2183. She was in a mess, especially her dress, which was drenched in milk. She had to change her clothes and think about the rest later. After Song Jinghua calmed down, he suddenly said, Song Enya is pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child, right? Jiang Qiming and Song Yunxi looked at each other and nodded. Now that Song Enya was no longer around, Song Jinghua lit a cigarette and took a few puffs. After a long while, he said in a deep voice, let's abort the child while it's still young and hasn't formed. Jiang Qiming was a little surprised by his decision. Abort it? What else can we do? Song Jinghua snorted in annoyance. Don't tell me we're going to give birth to this illegitimate child. Song Yunxi asked worriedly, Enya? Will Enya be willing? Since it's come to this, it's not up to her to decide on this matter. Just now, she promised me in the car that she'd listen to me on this matter. This child can't be kept. She's still unmarried. If she gives birth to this child, we won't let others make a fool of the Song family. Before the news gets out, I'll make some arrangements and find a reliable big hospital to perform an operation to abort the child. Song Jinghua's tone was so calm that it was almost cruel. At first glance it sounded very ruthless. However, only Song Yunxi could tell that her father's tone was filled with restraint and regret. He was enduring his heartache and forcing himself to be so resolute. Indeed, if this child was kept, not only would it harm Enya, but it would also implicate the entire family's reputation. This was a step that could not be taken. I don't think we have to abort this child, right? Jiang Qiming suddenly said. Song Jinghua looked at her, but unexpectedly, he did not refute her words. Instead he asked, then in your opinion what should we do with this child? Jiang Qiming was a little surprised. In the past she had never had a say in this family. However, now that Song Jinghua was actually asking for her opinion, she felt a little better. I think that having Mu Yaja's child in her stomach is better than having Mu Yaja's child. Jinghua, think about it. Now Mu Yaja has already stepped down from his position as the head of the Mu family. I heard that he has fallen out with the Mu family. It's impossible for him to return to the Mu family. In your words, I have nothing left. However, Mu Yanqing was different. He also has some status in the Mu Jia. Although he is not the Mu Jia's patriarch, if he marries Enya with the power of the Song family, it won't be difficult for him to become the patriarch. Perhaps he could talk to him about this matter and see what his intentions were. After all, it's his blessing that our family's Enya is compatible with him. He won't necessarily lose out. If the two families could form a marriage alliance, then when Enya's child was born, it could be said that the mother's status would rise because of her son. Perhaps in the future, Enya can become the Mu Jia's mistress. The power of the two families balanced each other and supported each other. It could be said that both sides were seeking benefits. Mu Yanqing is a sensible child. If the situation is beneficial to him, he will definitely accept it. Song Jinghua suddenly sneered disapprovingly. Chapter 2184. Do you want me to bluntly say that this last stole the sperm bank in order to get pregnant with Yaja's child? In the end, she made a huge mistake and ended up with his sperm. Now she's pregnant with his child due to a freak combination of factors. Isn't this a fantasy? What is Mu Yanqing thinking about the Song family? Do you think I haven't embarrassed myself enough? Jiang Qiming hesitated to speak, but Song Jinghua continued, besides, how can you be sure that Enya is pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child? What if the child isn't Mu Yaja's? Mu Yanqing's personality isn't as calm as Mu Yaja's. If that happens, won't things get even uglier? Jiang Qiming smiled. Jinghua, don't worry about this. Before that, for insurance, I'll think of a way to secretly do another paternity test. If it's confirmed to be Mu Yanqing's child, then everyone will be happy. If it's not, then according to your opinion, let's abort the child. Song Yunxi was conflicted. Is that okay? It seems like my sister is the one who threw herself at him. Song Jinghua scoffed. Do you think your mother and I want to do this? If Enya didn't ruin herself and get pregnant for no reason, would we be in such a passive position? Song Yunxi fell silent guiltily. This suggestion of yours is not impossible. According to the news, the second in charge of the Mu family seems to have the intention of supporting Mu Yanqing. However, that old man has been busy with the company's affairs recently. After that rascal stepped down, the entire Mu group is in a mess. At this time, I'm afraid he's bitterly cleaning up the mess. I wonder how the Mu group will develop in the future. Does Mu Yenqing have the ability to take on such a heavy responsibility? However, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. No matter how bad the Mu group is, it's still the richest family in the capital. Yenqing and Enya are well matched in terms of social status. It's not a loss. Song Jinghua pondered for a moment and narrowed his eyes. I'm just afraid that we'll make the wrong bet and lose both the woman and the money. Jiang Qiming added, I've interacted with Yenqing a few times. My impression of him is that he's a humble and responsible person. He might not be as capable as Yaja, but he had a simple personality and was not as shrewd and unpredictable as Yaja. He was quite easy to control. If Enya is betrothed to him, it will be a more optimistic situation for us. The three of them suddenly fell silent. Amidst the dead silence, Song Enya changed into a new set of clothes and sat back on the sofa. Perhaps it was because Jiang Qiming had comforted her for a long time on the way home. Her emotions finally stabilized and her complexion looked better. When she went downstairs just now, she stood in the distance for a while so she heard some of their conversation. She really did not expect that the child in her stomach would be Mu Yenqing's. But now that things had come to this, she was already disheartened. No matter what Song Jinghua suggested to her, she would not put up any resistance. Because once the heart died, it would truly die. As for her future, she did not have any expectations. She might as well go with the flow and let them arrange it. After all, she was the one who had caused this disaster. She should be responsible for it. She no longer had any thoughts about who she would marry or who she would marry. Chapter 2185. Actually, I'm not sure who the father of the child in my stomach is. Anyway, I'll listen to all of your arrangements. Song Enya stood her ground and expressed her opinion timidly. Seeing that she was so cooperative, Jiang Qiming was overjoyed. Good. Enya, you're finally a little more sensible. Don't worry, Mommy won't let you suffer. Okay, Song Jinghua suddenly said, it's decided for now. Tomorrow, find an opportunity to do a paternity test to see if the child is Mu Yenqing's. We'll discuss other matters after we get the results. Okay. Everyone reached a consensus. The next day, Mu Yenqing did not receive any calls from Meng Qingxue the entire day. Not to mention a call, he did not even receive a text message. Before he left last night, he had already made his stand clear and said that if Meng Qingxue was sensible, she would call to cater to him and agree to his arrangements. However, he did not receive any reply from Meng Qingxue until evening. He was instantly furious. He really couldn't figure out what this woman's motive was. Could it be that for a woman like her, glory and wealth were her lifelong pursuits? He wanted to give her glory and wealth. He would also allow her to give birth to the child. After the child was born, as the child's father, he would also bear the responsibility of raising and nurturing the child. If the child was well-groomed, he might have a chance to enter the Mu family legitimately. How could she turn a blind eye to such tempting conditions? He had said such harsh words. Even if she did not care for the generous treatment he had arranged for her, she should at least give him an explanation, shouldn't she? If she did not want his arrangement, she should at least report to him whether the child was staying or leaving. Mu Yenqing wanted to call her several times to question her, but when he thought of her timid expression, he could not bear to do so and suppressed the urge. As if to deliberately give her the cold shoulder, he did not disturb her until night fell. However, for some reason, the more he ignored her, the more uneasy he felt. At 9 o'clock in the evening, he went to her apartment uninvited. He knocked on the door for a long time but no one answered. Just as he suspected that something had happened to her and was about to dial her number, the door suddenly opened. Meng Qingshue's haggard and gloomy face entered his sight. However, upon seeing his arrival, she wasn't as happy as before, nor did she look surprised. She only said coldly, "You're here." These 3 words were neither cold nor warm, and they served to accentuate her indifferent attitude. The man fumed. "You didn't call me the whole day. What does that mean? Didn't you say that if there's nothing important, I shouldn't disturb you?" She asked curiously, but it made him fall silent. He was speechless and embarrassed. He had indeed said such words, but right now, he hated her thoughtfulness and gentleness. Like an unreasonable child, he shouted at her, "I told you not to disturb me and you didn't even call me? How ridiculous." Meng Qingshue's face turned even paler. What, wasn't he the one who was being ridiculous? "Let me in," he ordered matter-of-factly. Chapter 2186. After he walked in, Meng Qingxue stood at the door in a daze for a long time before she closed the door desolately. Mu Yenqing's sudden arrival gave her a great shock. She originally thought that this man must be angry with her, so he would not set foot here for a while. However, after not contacting him for a day, this man came to her door in a hurry at night. What is he doing? Why is he in such a hurry? Did the Mu family give him an ultimatum to clean up all the love affairs he had caused outside? Meng Qingxue caressed her lower abdomen worriedly, her heart aching terribly. If I had known, I wouldn't have told him. If she had known that he wouldn't marry her, she would have been fully prepared from the beginning. Even though this child was an accident, even if she was pregnant, she couldn't bear to abort it, so she shouldn't have been in such a hurry to tell him. At least, at such a time, even if he had declared that he would not marry her, she could have left him with dignity and dignity. She could have left quietly with the child in her stomach and not been as passive as she was now. This time he seemed to be very stubborn. Could it be that he's planning to tie me up for an abortion? At the thought of this, Meng Qingshue's face turned even uglier. As soon as Mu Yanqing walked in, he saw the fragrant noodles on the table. It was a bucket of instant noodles. It looked like it had just been cooked, for it was still steaming hot. However, if it were Yangcha noodles it would be fine. This bucket of instant noodles was sold at a convenience store for 4 yuan a bucket. It was just a very simple instant noodles with no nutrition at all. Was she going to eat this for dinner? Mu Yanqing was inexplicably angry. He pointed at the noodles on the table and said angrily, "You're going to eat this? Since you're pregnant you should eat some. How can you keep up with the nutrition if you only eat instant noodles? What has it got to do with you?" Mu Yanqing said coldly, "Don't I transfer money to your account every month? If you don't use this money to buy some nutrition and supplements, how can you raise the child well if you only eat instant noodles?" Pausing for a moment, he turned around and was about to reprimand her when he saw Meng Qingxue standing behind him in silence. She bit her lower lip hard, her eyes brimming with tears. No matter how hard she tried to hold it in, her tears became more and more turbulent. One drop after another fell down her cheeks. Her pitiful look. Mu Yanqing was stunned at once. When he came back to his senses, he saw her trying to hold back her tears. Feeling impatient, he yelled at her, "Why are you crying for no reason?" Meng Qingxue did not answer him. Instead, she asked righteously, "What are you doing here for no reason?" Mu Yanqing was momentarily speechless and did not know how to answer her. Suddenly, he realized how sharp her attitude was and instantly felt somewhat displeased. "Why can't I be here? I rented this apartment. Since I rented it, it's my territory. What's wrong with me coming to my own territory?" Meng Qingxue sneered. With tears in her eyes, she raised her head stubbornly and said, "Mu Yanqing, I've already returned the apartment you rented for me previously. I earned this apartment with the money I earned from my part-time job. This is where I live, not your territory. You can't come and go as you please." Chapter 2187. This woman was actually fighting with him in all seriousness. Mu Yanqing was instantly enraged. Hence, like a stubborn and willful child, he gritted his teeth and said, "I bought the diamond and necklace you're wearing, didn't I? I also got someone to get your phone made for you, didn't I? Let's not talk about the other things in this house. Even you are mine. I've engraved a seal on your body, and the child in your stomach is also mine." Meng Qingxue flew into a rage out of humiliation. Her eyes were red as she hysterically tried to stop him from continuing. Mu Yanqing. However, Mu Yanqing ignored her and her pair of red and swollen eyes as he declared arrogantly, "I even accompanied you to the mall to buy the clothes you're wearing. Tell me, other than this rental house, what else do you have that belongs to you?" Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip hard as she stared at him in a daze. She was so sad that she broke into a smile. Then, right in front of him, she grabbed the ends of her clothes with both hands. Almost immediately, she deftly took them off and threw them at his face as she screamed at the top of her lungs, "I'm returning them to you. I'm returning everything to you. All right." Mu Yanqing was stunned by her outburst and was momentarily at a loss as to what to do. Meng Qingxue was only wearing a piece of underwear. Apart from taking off her dress and throwing it at him, she also took off the diamond studs in her ears, the crystal necklace and the diamond anklet and threw them all at him. Finally, he saw her suddenly turn around and walk toward the bedroom. Mu Yanqing grabbed her dress and chased after her, only to see her rummaging through the drawers and drawers. Finally, she found some expensive jewelry that he had given her in the past in a few dressing boxes. Most of them were expensive and she had been keeping them safe all this while. She could not even bear to wear them, but now she found them all and threw them all on the bed. "What are you doing?" Mu Yanqing reprimanded. Meng Qingxue on the other hand seemed to be deaf. In the end she took out a passbook, a few credit cards, and a Hermes bag that Mu Yanqing had given her for her birthday last year. She threw everything on the bed. Meng Qingxue suddenly raised her head and stood in front of him. She forced herself to be more elegant and free, like a proud queen. She suddenly said, "I'll return everything to you. Whether it's the passbook, the credit card, the diamonds, the jewelry, or the branded bag you gave me, I'll return everything to you. From now on, let's cut off all ties. Please don't bother me anymore." "You. What nonsense are you talking about?" "I'm not talking nonsense. I'm serious. Because I've had enough. I've had enough of your arrogance and conceit. I've had enough of your indifference and heartlessness. I've had enough of being like a caged canary, watching over you with all my heart, yet being unable to obtain your true heart. I've had enough of missing you without seeing the light of day, yet you don't care about me at all. I've had enough of your self-righteousness and lack of consideration for me." What did she get for her sincerity? Chapter 2188. Meng Qingxue said with tears streaming down her face. She grabbed a diamond earring and threw it at his face. "Mu Yanqing, how can you be so high and mighty? Yes. Your family background is superior. Yes. Your background is extraordinary. But it's not like I have to be trampled on by you. Let me off. From now on you'll go your way and I'll go mine. We'll mind our own business and mind our own business. How about this?" "Ah. Shut up." Mu Yanqing could not take it anymore and scolded her. "You're deliberately provoking me, aren't you?" Meng Qingxue was suddenly at a loss. Tears streamed down her face and her eyes were empty as she questioned him seriously. "Then what do you want me to do?" Mu Yanqing walked over and held her shoulders as he said domineeringly, "Meng Qingxue, as long as you know what's good for you, you'd better take back your words and accept my arrangements obediently. Isn't that good? Don't you want to be with me? We can be together for the rest of our lives. If you become my woman, I'll give you the glory and wealth that others can only dream of. You can be like a rich madam, wear the prettiest clothes, wear the most expensive jewelry, and buy the most branded bags. I'll do everything for you." Meng Qingxue suddenly mocked him coldly, "But you can't give me a status." Mu Yanqing was stunned for a moment before he suddenly said in disgust and suspicion, "Meng Qingxue, I'm warning you. Don't go overboard. Don't be too greedy." "Greedy?" Meng Qingxue laughed out loud as if she had heard an inexplicably funny joke. Perhaps it was too funny that she laughed so hard that she teared up. She rubbed her eyes, and this sad laughter instantly turned into sobs as she sobbed. "Yes, I'm greedy. I just want to be your rightful wife. I want to stand by your side openly one day. Even if I don't wear the most branded clothes or carry the most expensive bags, I'll still feel gratified and happy. This kind of thinking may be a little too extravagant for you, Mu Yanqing. You're really generous. You can give me endless glory and wealth, but you're stingy with even a basic status. I really don't know if this is something to be happy about or to find it laughable. Why are you so stubborn?" Mu Yanqing hated her stubbornness. He held her shoulders tightly and forced her to sit by the bed. He then said seriously, "Do you know how long I've worked for this day? My second uncle said he's decided to help me, but before that, I have to agree to one condition. First, I have to cooperate with him. My power and status aren't that stable yet. If I want to sit on the patriarch's seat, I'm still a little lacking. If I were to marry a young lady from a big family, then it would definitely be an advantage for me. Why don't you use us?" Tears streamed down Meng Qingshue's face as she said, "Yanqing, I love you. Even if you have nothing, I'll always be by your side and never leave you. I only want you. I don't care about the glory and wealth. I only want to be with you." Mu Yanqing was moved by her words. No matter who he was, his heart would soften at her words. Chapter 2189. However, even if he was touched by Meng Qingshue's unswerving devotion, he would never give up the fight for the family head position because of this. He had waited for this day for too long. Now that he had such an opportunity, how could he give it up so easily? It was not easy for him to drag Mu Yaja down from his position. If he gave up just like that, wouldn't he be paving the way for someone else? At the thought of this, Mu Yanqing regained his rationality and flung her hand away. "Impossible. I can't give up just like that." "Then, let's break up," Meng Qingxue suddenly suggested. Mu Yanqing turned around in surprise. He didn't expect that this woman would be so magnanimous and even break up with him before he did. He also didn't expect that this woman, who had always loved him with all her heart, would let him go just like that, without any reluctance at all. "You want to break up with me? Don't worry, I don't want any compensation from you. Even if it's a breakup fee, I'll return everything you've given me. I only hope that from now on we'll cut off all ties. I won't pester you anymore and you won't pester me anymore. Okay. If it were in the past, Mu Yanqing would definitely suspect that this woman was playing hard to get with him. However, at this moment, when he saw the determination in Meng Qingshua's eyes, his heart suddenly trembled. This woman actually said such a sentence in an extremely serious manner. Meng Qingxue continued, "As for the child in my stomach, you don't have to worry too much about it. I won't cause you much trouble. Whether you get rid of it or keep it, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Even if this child doesn't have a father from a young age as a mother, I'll definitely make it up to him and raise him up. I only ask that you give me the right to be a mother and stop interfering with us." "You?" Meng Qingxue smiled coldly and then walked around him to the living room. She sat down on the sofa, picked up the bucket of noodles and started eating. When Mu Yanqing returned to the living room, he saw her from afar holding a bowl of noodles and wolfing them down with tears in her eyes. It could be seen that she was starving and her stomach was rumbling. She was no longer as fashionable and delicate as she had been when they first met. Instead, she was in dire straits. Last night, he had deliberately ignored her and left in such a carefree manner. She had not eaten anything the entire night and had cried herself to sleep. Then, she had been frightened by a nightmare and had cried herself awake. When she woke up, she kept crying. She didn't eat breakfast or lunch. She couldn't lift her spirits. No matter what she did, she was surrounded by sadness. She didn't know where her tears came from. She cried until her eyes started to hurt. She scolded herself. Why did she cry so much for an irresponsible man? However, the more she thought about it, the more she cried. She couldn't do anything well, so she didn't go for her part-time job anymore. She called for a day off and simply hid in her blanket. She cried and slept and cried and spent the day in a daze. Therefore, as soon as he opened the door, he saw a pair of red and swollen eyes that were like walnuts. Chapter 2190. Just as she was about to eat after cooking, this man came uninvited again. After saying so much, Meng Qingxue wished she could cut open her heart and let him see it clearly, but this man seemed indifferent. Right from the beginning, what he cared about was not her or the child in her stomach, but power and wealth. Meng Qingshue's heart turned cold. She thought, instead of pestering him, why don't I just let him go? No matter what I say, he won't change his mind. She shouldn't have those illusory dreams. Mu Yanqing's heart ached when he saw her down and out. He calmed down and said to her, "Don't make yourself suffer like this. Come with me. I've arranged a nanny and bodyguard for you. Come with me and I'll settle you down. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child." Meng Qingxue ate the noodles numbly. She did not say a word, but the expression on her face seemed to say, "No need." He was deliberately giving him the cold shoulder. Later on, Mu Yanqing rambled on again, but she did not listen to a single word he said. In the end, she only heard him stomping his feet as if he was extremely angry. Then she heard the door slam and leave. Meng Qingxue raised her head and looked at the empty house. Finally, she picked up the bowl of noodles and drank a few mouthfuls of hot soup. However, she could not tell if the salty and astringent taste was the taste of the soup or her tears. The Song family. On this day, Song Jingwu went out. Jiang Qiming seemed to have used some connections to get a few strands of Mu Yanqing's hair from a servant of the Mu family and rushed to the hospital for a DNA test. However, Song Yunxi was worried about Song Enya's condition and stayed in her room the whole day. Song Enya did not get out of bed for the whole day and even ate her meals in bed. After getting pregnant, the symptoms of pregnancy followed. Song Enya's reaction was especially severe. She vomited badly and felt weak all over. Coupled with her drowsiness, she lay in bed for the whole day. In the evening, Jiang Qiming rushed home. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she saw Song Yunxi sitting by the bed, playing games on her phone. Song Enya, on the other hand, was leaning against the headboard. Unknowingly, she had woken up and was staring blankly at the ceiling. "Enya, the DNA test report is out, and it's confirmed that you're carrying Mu Yanqing's child." Jiang Qiming said happily, only to see Song Enya lowering her head dejectedly and letting out a long sigh as tears streamed down her cheeks. Before this, she actually had some hope. Even if it was Mu Yaja's child, it would be fine. She would rather this was Mu Yaja's child and then abort the child because it meant that what Mu Yaja said last night was just to scare her. She didn't expect him to really use tricks to swap the sperm. This meant that this man's coldness was real. His heartlessness towards her was also real. She had loved him for more than 10 years. She had loved him so miserably, but in the end she had been played in the palm of his hand. This knowledge almost destroyed her. "Liar, liar," she mumbled through gritted teeth, full of humiliation. Chapter 2191. Why are you doing this to me? Song Enya roared as she covered herself with the blanket and cried uncontrollably. Jiang Qiming's heart ached for her daughter, but she was also angry. Her heart ached for her daughter's downfall and helplessness, but she was even angrier at her stubbornness. Enya, isn't it great that you're pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child? Compared to Yaja, Mu Yanqing is now in high demand. If this child works hard and becomes the head of the Mu family, then you'll definitely be the matriarch of the Mu family in the future. Although things are a little complicated, it's still a lucky hit. Carrying Mu Yaja's child is better than carrying Mu Yaja's child. Song Yunshi stayed at the side and did not say a word. Song Enya, on the other hand, did not make a sound. She hid under the blanket and saw a bulging figure, which seemed to be secretly crying, trembling slightly. She walked over and comforted her. Enya, don't be too sad. Think about it. It's very important for a woman to choose the right husband in her life. Marriage is a second reincarnation for a woman. As long as she's chosen well, she'll have a lifetime of happiness. Besides, Yanqing is quite outstanding. He's gentler than Yaja. If you work hard, he'll definitely treat you like a treasure and dote on you. But what about Mu Yaja? Could it be that you still haven't thought it through and are still thinking about that lad? He's no longer the head of the Mu family, so life won't be easy for him. You'll only implicate yourself and suffer if you're with him. I know that you have deep feelings for him, but can feelings be eaten? Mom also admits that Yaja is very outstanding and extraordinarily handsome, but now that he's down and out, Mu Yanqing and him are like heaven and earth. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Women naturally have to be more open-minded and know how to treat themselves better. Of course, men are also accepted based on merit. Mu Yanqing isn't bad. Jiang Qiming tried her best to persuade Song Enya before she finally stopped crying and calmed down a little. This child was Song Enya's only hope. With this child in her arms, perhaps the Song family could rise again with the help of the Mu family. Song Yunshi added, Enya, just give up on Uncle Mu. By treating you like this, it's obvious that he doesn't care about you at all. He even used such a method to scheme against you. What's worse is that he even used your innocence to threaten father and the Song family. What's the point of thinking about such a vile man? I can't accept this. Song Enya gritted her teeth. I can't take this lying down. How am I inferior to that woman? Last night, she had clearly thought it through, but when she woke up and looked at the bright sun outside the window, it couldn't shine into her heart. Thinking back, she felt that Mu Yaja had done her in. Yes, she had schemed and plotted a lot. In order to be with the person she loved, she had indeed used dirty methods. But that was for the sake of loving him. She had never had any thoughts of harming him. When she thought about the artificial insemination because her body was too weak, the failure rate of artificial insemination was too high. She would rather suffer more and use test tube babies. After much difficulty, she finally got pregnant. But in the end, what was the result? In the end, she was ruthlessly toyed with by the man she loved. This feeling was so painful that it was as if a knife was stabbing her heart and making her bleed. Chapter 2192. Right now, her hatred was bone and flesh. She loved, hated, and was infatuated with Mu Yaja, but in the end she felt more like a lively clown. In the end, all her efforts were in vain and she ended up as a joke. She had been on tenterhooks all this while, yet she ended up in such a state? Song Enya's heart was twisted and she could not let it go. My daughter is so outstanding, it's clearly his fault. Daughter, let it go. Jiang Qiming comforted her gently. Song Enya gritted her teeth for a while before she felt a little better. Brother Mu. Just you wait. One day I'll make you pay for all the humiliation you've given me today. That night, Song Jinghua came back from a dinner party with a worried frown. Jiang Qiming had just coaxed her daughter, but when she saw him looking gloomy and absent-minded, she could not help feeling worried. Jinghua, what's wrong with you? You don't look good. Did you go to the hospital today? He did not answer his mother's question and asked directly. Jiang Qiming nodded. I did 2 tests, and the results showed that they're both Mu Yanqing's children. Song Jinghua was not happy about this though. Instead, he said worriedly, Today, I heard from a source that the Muse don't seem to know about this. Enya did a good job with this matter, so not many people know about it. It's only natural that the Muse don't know about it. That's not the problem. Song Jinghua suddenly glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and said, Mu Linfeng intends to arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing. Do you know about this? Jiang Qiming was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. A marriage alliance? Yes. I heard that they've already started looking for one, but I heard that Mu Linfeng is quite interested in the Lin's 3,000 gold ingots. Lin Shuya? Yes. Jiang Qiming's expression gradually turned ugly as she said worriedly, "The Lins are an impressive and prestigious family. Lin Shuya comes from a good family background. Not only is she well educated, but she's also the most doted on in the Lins. It's not surprising that Mu Linfeng has chosen her. But, what about Enya?" Song Jinghua frowned and said, "I'm thinking about that too." Jiang Qiming suggested, "Why don't we have a chat with Yanqin? There's no need to rush." The third daughter of the Lin family was very arrogant. If it were Mu Yaja it would be fine, but she might not take a liking to Mu Yanqing. We can't rush this matter. Otherwise the Song family will lose face. Then, let's endure it for the time being and act according to the circumstances. Is that what you mean? Yes. Song Jinghua nodded and suddenly asked with concern, "How's Enya's mood?" "It's not stable at all. I've thought things through, but I can't get over the hurdle in my heart for the time being." Jiang Qiming suddenly thought of something and asked nervously, "What about that matter? The thing you promised Yaja yesterday? Hush money?" "Yes." Song Jinghua's face darkened, then he sighed and shook his head helplessly. "Since he wants that piece of land, let's give it to him. Other than that, I can't think of any other way. This time we'll let him get away with it for the time being." "Is this really okay? That piece of land is worth a fortune. It can't be measured with money." Chapter 2193. Dad. At some point, Song Yunshi had been standing on the second floor, listening to their conversation in silence. When he heard this, he could not bear to listen any longer and suddenly said, "Dad, you don't have to be so afraid of this man anymore, right? Uncle Mu is no longer the head of the household and has nothing left. Do you have to be so wary of him? If you can't handle him, leave him to me. I know some brothers in the underworld. It won't be difficult for them to secretly take care of a poor boy with no power." "Bastard." Song Jinghua looked up and scolded him. "You don't know your place. What brothers in the underworld? Don't tell me you're referring to those people from the Gu family again? Didn't I tell you not to associate with the Gu family? You're still bothering those people behind my back, aren't you?" Song Yunshi's face turned red. If you have the time, you should read more books and at least broaden your horizons. Do you think that Mu Yaja has nothing left even though he's no longer the head of the household?" Song Jinghua suddenly snorted and said sarcastically, "If such an arrogant boy didn't have a backup plan for himself, how could he have left so easily? Don't be fooled by how powerless he looks now. Even with his current strength, you won't be his match at all if you go head-to-head with him. When he was still the head of the household he already had a lot of connections. Whether it's the underworld or the underworld, he has people in all walks of life. Don't try to hit a rock with an egg and be rebuffed." Song Yunshi's face turned pale at his words. She snorted indignantly, turned around and stormed into the room. Bang! The door was slammed loudly. Song Jinghua was even angrier now. He scolded, "Looks like this boy has been spoiled rotten by me. He lost his temper just because I said a few words to him. Do these two siblings really want to anger me to death?" Jiang Qiming immediately comforted, "Yunshi is still young and doesn't know any better. Don't be angry with him." However, Song Jinghua said disapprovingly, "He's already in his 20s and he still says that he doesn't know any better. Then how can he be considered sensible? 70 or 80 years old. Do you only know how to be sensible now?" Song Yunshi was standing in the living room. Even though the room was soundproof, he could still hear Song Jinghua's angry curses from the living room. His chest was filled with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. Clenching his fists tightly, he punched the door a few times as if he did not feel pain. Only then did he feel a little better. Muyaja. That heartless man. If it wasn't for him, the Song family's family. No matter what, he could not take this lying down. He had to teach Muyaja a lesson. Otherwise he wouldn't know how high the sky was and how deep the earth was. At the thought of this, Song Yunshi narrowed his eyes fiercely. His eyes were blazing with fury and ambition. Jingyi Private Clubhouse. This is the most luxurious private club near Dongjia. It's one of the 5 biggest clubs in Jing City. It has entertainment, conference, hotel. It has everything. Jingyi is the most luxurious private club. Just the membership fee for a year is several million. It's not something that ordinary people can afford. Chapter 2194. As a place exclusive to the rich, once night fell, some high-ranking officials, nobles and descendants of the rich and powerful clans would gather here, indulging in debauchery and indulging in debauchery. Jingyi Private Clubhouse was the property of the Gu family. Therefore the Gu family's power was concentrated in this area. In the swimming pool, Gu Jinglian was leaning against the side of the pool with a towel draped over his shoulder. He was holding a glass of dry red wine and sipping it casually. A man in a formal suit suddenly came over and knelt down beside the pool. He lowered his head and whispered in his ear, "Young Master Gu, there's a VIP guest who wants to see you." Gu Jinglian's almond-shaped eyes, which were originally closed for a nap, slowly opened. He glanced at him frivolously. When he heard that name, he suddenly drank the dry red wine in his glass in one gulp, then turned around and walked up the escalator. His well-built and well-defined body was soon exposed to the air. Transparent water droplets slowly slid down his body. That charming and devilish pheromones, no matter how strong a woman's willpower was at this moment, standing in front of him, she would be mesmerized to the point of suffocation, right? The moment he came out of the pool, someone immediately came forward and carefully took the wine glass from his hand. Then, another person respectfully came forward and draped a graceful and luxurious bathrobe over him. In the private room, Song Yunshi had already finished a whole bottle of red wine. At this moment he was really annoyed. When he thought about how weak his father was and how he was willing to give a piece of golden land to Muyaja, he was so angry that he drank another glass. Just as he opened the second bottle, the door was suddenly pushed open. He raised his head and saw Gu Jinglian, who walked in like a moon surrounded by stars. He forced a smile on his face and stood up respectfully. In front of this man, even if he was proud and arrogant, he still didn't dare to relax. "Young Master Gu." He chuckled and greeted politely. However, Gu Jinglian acted as if he did not hear her. He walked slowly to the sofa and sat down gracefully. Then he crossed his legs and looked very noble. After coming out of the swimming hall, he changed his clothes, but his black hair was still a little wet and slightly messy, but it did not diminish his heroic spirit. Song Yunshi was not embarrassed by the arrogance and disdain he had shown from beginning to end. Instead, she smiled more and more flatteringly. To him, a man like Gu Jinglian should be so arrogant and superior. The more one mingled in this circle, the more they paid attention to their status. Since their identities were different, their statuses would naturally be different as well. "Sit down. Don't stand on ceremony," Gu Jinglian said lightly, then beckoned with his finger. Soon a waiter came up and opened a bottle of Lafite. Song Yunshi silently sized him up. She had to admit that the man in front of her definitely didn't look like a crown prince from the underworld. Gu Jinglian's mother was one of the top 10 beauties in the capital back then, and he had inherited her beauty. His facial features were between genders, and his deep-set facial features were full of heroic spirit. However, his feminine eyes and exquisite nose and lips were definitely something that women could not compare to. Her beauty had nothing to do with gender. It was so beautiful that it was suffocating and breathtaking. Chapter 2195. His eyes in particular were captivating. The reason was that his pupils were different from those of ordinary people. His pure amber eyes were like top-grade and beautiful colored glass, flowing with light. He raised his eyelashes and raised his wrist to look at the time, as if secretly setting a time for Song Yunshi in front of him. He had always paid attention to the concept of time. Therefore, no matter who the person was, if they came to talk to him about something, they had to be concise and comprehensive within 30 minutes. Otherwise, he would not have that kind of patience. "Why are you looking for me? Speak." Song Yunshi first rubbed her hands a little uneasily and politely exchanged a few words. Then she went straight to the point and summarized the matter. "Muyaja, that bastard is too much. He's going too far. I really can't take this lying down. I can't watch him trample the Song family under his feet, so I want to teach him a lesson." Gu Jinglian nodded slightly, curled his lips, and then smiled evilly. "So, you came to me just to complain about these things?" In other words, there was some dissatisfaction. Song Yunshi and Gu Jinglian had known each other for a long time, but the relationship between the two of them could only be considered as casual acquaintances at best. Song Yunshi had always wanted to befriend Gu Jinglian, who had a strong background in the underworld. However, no matter how she tried to curry favor with him, it was difficult for her to get too close to him. Gu Jinglian was really too arrogant. He was like a natural aristocrat. The aura in his every move was incomparable. Song Yunshi said, "I came to you because I hope that you can help me vent my anger. Young Master Gu, I know that you have some tricks up your sleeve. In front of you, Muyaja is just a pitiful worm. Won't he be easily crushed under your feet?" "Not interested." Gu Jinglian interrupted her with little interest. His expression was cold and he yawned lazily. Muyaja? He had also heard about his resignation as the patriarch. However, he wasn't so bored as to go against a former overlord. The Mu family was an old rival of the Gu family, so they knew each other very well. Song Yunshi was short-sighted and stupid, But Gu Jinglian could see the situation clearly. Although Mu Yaja seemed to be in dire straits now, having lost some of his status and his former glory, it was as if he had fallen from the top of a mountain to the bottom of a valley thousands of meters down, smashed into pieces. Gu Jinglian, who could see the man's ambition clearly, knew that the current situation was only temporary. Before long, this man would once again stand at the peak at the speed of light in an extremely short amount of time. His current abject state was just a cover for others. Mu Yaja was the same as him, an arrogant man to the bone. He would never allow himself to fall from a high position. Even if he abdicated, it was just a means to advance by retreating. Therefore, he wasn't interested in having any entanglements with such an unfathomable man. Moreover, the Gu and Mu families had always minded their own business and didn't have any feud. Even if they had always been against each other, it was just a competition and had nothing to do with gratitude or grudges. To outsiders, Mu Yaja and Gu Jinglian seemed to be enemies and friends. They couldn't see clearly. But in fact, these two men were both at the top of the world and they seemed to appreciate each other. Chapter 2196. When Song Yunshi heard this, she was puzzled. Not interested? I don't think I have the obligation to help you. Gu Jinglian appeared to be very impatient. After saying this, he stood up and walked towards the door. Song Yunshi immediately stood up and said, "Young Master Gu, that's not what I meant. If you're willing to stand up for me, I definitely won't neglect you. You won't be short of remuneration either. As long as you can stand up for me, I definitely won't treat you unfairly." Gu Jinglian suddenly smiled and walked in front of him. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and bent down slightly to face him. He said evilly, "What makes you think that I'll provoke an enemy who's as powerful as me for a person whose name I don't even remember?" Song Yunshi's eyes widened in surprise. A cold glint flashed across Gu Jinglian's eyes. He reached out his hand and grabbed his chin with his slender fingers. He lifted his chin and sized him up. Song Yunshi's stubborn and unconvinced face looked so childish. Gu Jinglian suddenly tilted his head to the side. A sinister look appeared on his devilishly handsome face as he said, "For a man of Mu Yaja's stature, you either don't go against him, or you should be prepared to die together with him. Leave no room for negotiation and get rid of him completely." After a pause, he asked slowly, "How much are you going to pay? How much do you want?" "How much do I want?" Gu Jinglian seemed to have heard a funny joke and said coldly, "You don't seem to know the rules very well." "What do you mean?" Gu Jinglian patted his face. It was a humiliating action, arrogant and frivolous. Song Yunshi gritted her teeth because of this humiliating action. However, she heard him say, "Mu Yaja is worth hundreds of millions. Can you afford to buy his life?" As he spoke, he shook him off, smiled coldly, turned around and lit a cigarette. Gu Jinglian took a puff of smoke and narrowed his eyes. He said casually, "Kid, this complicated world is not as simple as you think. Don't think that just because your father is the mayor, you have the right to come here and make a fool of yourself. Get lost." After that, the waiter draped the black suit over his shoulders, leaving the two empty sleeves beside him as he walked towards the door in a carefree manner. Song Yunshi couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up and shouted at his back, "Stop right there." Even though he had shouted those two words with great vigor, Gu Jinglian seemed to be disdainful of his words and left without a word. He didn't know where his confidence came from, or perhaps it was the bottle of red wine he drank. With the help of the alcohol, he vented all his dissatisfaction and humiliation. "I think you just don't have the guts, right?" He claimed to be the crown prince of the Gu family, but unexpectedly he was also a coward. He said so much in a dignified manner, but in fact he didn't dare to play with Mu Yaja. The dignified Gu Jinglian only has this much courage. After venting her anger, she finished. In her anger, Song Yunshi kicked the short table beside her. The wine glass on the table tilted and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. The waiters in the private room looked at him strangely, or with a hint of fierceness. However, Song Yunshi was drunk. She didn't care whose territory she was in and shouted, "What are you looking at? A bunch of cowards." Chapter 2197. In the end, when he dragged his tired and drunk body and was about to leave, a group of men in black suddenly rushed into the private room. At this moment, Song Yunshi was so drunk that she was staggering. She glanced at the crowd and shouted unhappily, "What are you looking at? You guys." The man in the lead smiled majestically and said, "Young Master Song, you haven't paid your bill for tonight." "What bill?" Song Yunshi said angrily, "Didn't I just drink 2 bottles of red wine?" The man signaled with his eyes, and the waiter handed over the bill expressionlessly. Song Yunshi took it and glanced at it. She immediately exploded with anger. 8. 88 million? Yes. Young Master Song, pay the bill before you leave? They were obviously making things difficult for him. This was the Gu family's territory. What he said just now was undoubtedly looking for trouble in their territory. If they heard that someone dared to humiliate their master, they would naturally think of ways to make Song Yunshi uncomfortable. 2 bottles of dry red wine for 8 million, plus the wine glass you broke, 880,000. Young Master Song, pay the bill. Bullsh *T. What kind of wine is so expensive? You're obviously blackmailing me, aren't you? Just pay directly. Don't talk nonsense with us. If you don't pay, we won't be polite. Song Yunshi slammed the table. She was drunk and was not afraid of them at all. She shouted with her tongue out, "Do you know who I am? My father is the head of the *T organization. What can you do to me?" Ah. When the group of people heard this, they roared with laughter. Song Yunshi was so embarrassed that her face and ears turned red. She thickened her neck and said angrily, "What are you laughing at?" One of them said contemptuously, "Bullsh *T head of the *T organization. Even if the Heavenly King is here, he can't talk about the law. Young Master Song, you're standing on the Gu family's territory. Here you have to follow our rules. If you don't pay, you can do whatever you want. Then don't blame us for being impolite." As he spoke, the man ordered his subordinates, "Go, this brat dares to go back on his word. Show him some tricks." As soon as he finished speaking, a group of brothers behind him immediately rushed up and surrounded Song Yunshi, punching and kicking her. Song Yunshi was from the June team. After all, she had practiced martial arts. However, she was drunk after all. Her punches were light and without any strength. Soon she was defeated and beaten to a pulp. 10 minutes later, at the back door of the clubhouse, Song Yunshi was kicked out like a piece of garbage. She fell to the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. That man mocks him, "You don't have money and you come to Jianghu. Idiot." Everyone laughed and closed the door. Song Yunshi staggered to his feet. He touched his nose and felt a sharp pain from a dislocated bone. He lowered his head and saw a pool of blood on his palm. He clenched his teeth and turned around, but he soon fell down again after taking a few shaky steps. That person walked into the meeting room. Gu Jinglian sat in front of the table and flipped through the documents calmly. Then he heard his subordinate report respectfully, "Young Master Gu, the trash has been cleaned up." Gu Jinglian didn't even raise his eyelids and said, "In the future, open your eyes and look carefully. Don't let any dog in." "Yes, I understand." Gu Jinglian suddenly thought of something and asked calmly, "Is she dead?" Chapter 2198. Gu Jinglian closed the document and said coldly, "It's such a cold day. Get a car to send him to the hospital. It's bad luck if he dies here." Okay. It's Lunar New Year's Eve tomorrow. Muyaja was reading in the study when Yun Shirshir walked into the study. She rested her head on his shoulder and smiled happily. Her eyes were sparkling and she looked very excited. After you use reminder, she checked the calendar and confirmed that it would be Lunar New Year's Eve tomorrow night. She was overjoyed. After all, this was the first time she and Muyaja spent New Year's Eve together. She was looking forward to it. Muyaja, however, remained unmoved and continued flipping through his book. His emotions appeared to be calm as he hummed in acknowledgement. Oh. Yun Shirshir was unhappy with his cold attitude. She pushed his book away and forced him to look at her. She said seriously, "It's going to be Lunar New Year soon. Don't you look forward to it?" "Look forward to what?" Yun Shirshir was a little unhappy. "You don't seem to be looking forward to the Lunar New Year?" Muyaja was stunned for a moment before he smiled faintly. "I've never celebrated the Lunar New Year before, so I feel that it's no different from other days." "How is that possible?" "There are many things to celebrate the Lunar New Year. For example, today is the night before the Lunar New Year's Eve. You're not allowed to be busy. Let's prepare for Lunar New Year's Eve together." Before Lunar New Year's Eve, Yun Shirshir started to get busy. First, she had to clean the house. Even though she, Yu, and Xiao Yichen had already cleaned the house, that was because they were not allowed to clean the house during the 3 days of the Lunar New Year. They did not want to lose their fortune. Hence, they had to clean the house and courtyard early in the morning on Lunar New Year's Eve to bid farewell to the old and welcome the new. Yun Shirshir had already bought the fireworks and firecrackers in advance. Every New Year they would set off firecrackers early in the morning and fireworks at night. This was an unshakable activity. In the living room, Yu had already prepared a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. When Muyaja came to the living room, Yun Shirshir was already sitting in front of the table with a brush in hand. She was thinking hard about how to write a few couplets. Xiao Yichen leaned on the side and muttered, "Mommy, is your calligraphy readable?" Yu Yu said affirmatively, "Of course. Mommy's calligraphy skills are unquestionable." Yun Shirshir said proudly, "Mommy has been practicing calligraphy since I was in university. You can say that I've made some progress in my studies." Mu Yaja came to her side and looked at the two Red Spring Festival couplets. At this moment they had not written anything yet, so he asked, "What couplets do you plan to write?" Yun Shirshir's mind was blank and she didn't know what to write. Yu Yu suddenly said, "Let's put up a sticker on the front door that reads, 'Heaven increases the years, people live longer, and when spring comes, families are blessed.'" He then took out two portraits of door gods, Yuqi Jingda and Qin Xiong. "I've prepared the portraits too." Xiao Yichen took a look and his lips twitched. "What's this?" "Door gods. Door gods." Yu Yu said, "Yuqi Jingda and Qin Xiong." Xiao Yichen was puzzled and asked, "Why do you want to put up these two guys?" Chapter 2199. "Then I can do it too." Xiao Yichen flexed his muscles. "Draw a picture of me and paste it on the door. I want to be a door god too." Yu Yu snorted and said disdainfully, "With your skinny arms and legs, you still want to be a door god." Yuqi Jingda and Qin Xiong are marshals under Li Shimin. The reason for this custom is that after Li Shimin ascended the throne, he couldn't sleep at night because he killed countless people and often had nightmares. Therefore, the officials suggested that Yuqi Jingda and Qin Xiong should stand guard at the door so that they could sleep well at night. Later, the palace sent an artist to draw these two people and paste it on the door. Are you an encyclopedia? You know so much." Yu Yu said disdainfully, "Do you think I'm like you? Simple-minded." While the two little guys were bickering, Yun Shirshir finished writing the couplet and showed it to them. "It's done." Mu Yaja glanced at it and was slightly surprised. The handwriting was clear and elegant. It was indeed beautiful calligraphy. Mu Yichen was so shocked that his mouth opened wide. He said in a daze, "Mommy, the handwriting is not bad." Yun Shirshir was suddenly at a loss. "What should we paste on the bedroom?" "Let's write birds flying happily in the sky and the earth tied together in a knot." Yu said again. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja looked at each other and lowered their heads in shame. Their educational level was worse than a child's. Shame. After writing the couplet, they wanted to paste it on New Year's Eve. Yu Yu brought a stack of red paper and two pairs of scissors and said that he wanted to cut the window flowers. When Mu Yaja saw this, his curiosity was piqued and he excitedly asked Yu Yu to teach him. Yu Yu had been good at handicrafts since he was young. During the Lunar New Year, he cut the window decorations himself. They were as good as the ones bought outside. Mu Yaja was also interested. He looked at the two little guys' scissors and felt that it was a bit interesting. He took a piece of red paper and fiddled with it for a long time. Finally, he unfolded it only to find that the cut was a mess. Yun Shirshir, who was standing at the side, could not help bursting into laughter. Yu Yu also saw her father's terrible handiwork skills. She covered her mouth and snickered. Even Mu Yichen laughed mercilessly. "Daddy is so stupid." Mu Yaja glared at him in dissatisfaction. He snorted and said confidently, "That's because no one taught me. Let me do it." Yu Yu abandoned Mu Yichen and sat on Mu Yaja's lap, personally teaching him. Paper cutting was really amazing. She watched as the boy folded and cut a piece of red paper in his hand. From time to time, he would carefully make a few strokes with a knife. Finally, when the paper was unfolded, the word "Fu" appeared neatly on the paper. It looked very proper. Mu Yaja also learned seriously. In the end, under Yu Yu's guidance, he also learned the basics of paper cutting. At least it was pleasing to the eye. Yu Yu nodded and commented, "You've made some progress." She pasted the window decorations on the glass, the door, and the wall. The festive atmosphere of the Lunar New Year was immediately brought out. Mu Yaja hugged Mu Yichen and looked at the clear glass. The red window decorations made him smile. So, the Lunar New Year felt so warm. Chapter 2200. However, it turned out that spending the New Year with family was such a warm and blissful experience. Actually, the New Year was not on the streets. The true New Year was at home and in one's heart. The true meaning of the New Year was only when one's family was together. Mu Yaja suddenly understood why all the employees in the company could not wait to return home at the end of the year. Dishing Financial Group's usual practice was to finish all the work on hand and then have an early holiday. Therefore, half a month before the New Year, all the employees worked hard to catch up with their workload so that they could spend more time with their families on such meaningful days. Mu Yaja personally pasted the last piece of paper on the window of the study and picked up Xiao Yichen. The father and son looked at each other and smiled warmly. Daddy? Daddy. Yu ran over with 2 big red lanterns in his hands. He beamed and said, Daddy, come and do me a favor. What favor? Muyaja put down Xiao Chen and walked over. Yu grabbed his hand and hurried toward the door. It turned out that Yu wanted to hang 2 red lanterns at the door. After all, it would look more festive. However, he was short. Even if Yun Shirshir lifted him up high, it was still difficult for him to do so. There was no ladder at home, so he went to Muyaja eagerly. At 188 meters, Muyaja lifted Yu up easily and hooked him. After Yu hung the lanterns, the festive atmosphere was immediately apparent. As it was nearing New Year's Eve, Yun Shirshir drove to the supermarket and decided to buy the vegetables and meat for the New Year's Eve dinner in advance. She also prepared some dumpling wrappers to make dumplings. It was New Year's Eve after all. It was a custom for everyone to sit together, make dumplings and eat dumplings together. After buying the groceries, Yun Shirshir suddenly thought of something and suggested, let's invite Xiao Jie to join us for the New Year's Eve dinner. It's just an extra pair of chopsticks with more people. It'll be livelier. Okay. Yu agreed and was quite interested. Muyaja did not have any objections. It was his first time celebrating the new year with his family, so he felt that it would be livelier with more people around. Thus Yun Shirshir called Gong Jie. When the call went through, she happily invited him. Xiao Jie, tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Let's have New Year's Eve dinner together. After a while, Gong Jie then asked a question. New Year's Eve? What does that mean? Yun Shirshir Yushi had suddenly forgotten that when she and little Jie were still young, they did not have a proper New Year's celebration. She vaguely remembered that her mother was short of money at that time. On New Year's Eve, having meat and fish was already considered a good New Year's celebration. When his mother was not around, little Jie should have grown up overseas and could be considered half a foreigner. Therefore, he was not very familiar with the customs and terms of the Spring Festival. Hence, she explained seriously, it's New Year's Eve. Tomorrow night is New Year's Eve, so let's have a reunion dinner together. The more the merrier. After the reunion dinner, we're going to the riverside to set off fireworks to welcome the new year. Are you coming? She had already purchased the fireworks. Chapter 2201. Some fireworks cost a few dozen yuan each, while some cost a few hundred yuan for just 1 second. These were things that she would never have dared to think about in the past. In recent years, the capital had implemented a standard of strictly prohibiting fireworks in the city. However, on New Year's Eve, many people still went to the riverside to set off fireworks. Firstly, it was for the festive atmosphere. Secondly, setting off fireworks was suitable for all ages. It was also one of the children's favorite activities. Without it, it would inevitably be lacking in flavor. Setting off fireworks was an ancient tradition passed down by the ancestors. It would be a pity to lose it. Gong Jie readily agreed, sure. Yun Shirshir said, then it's settled. Be there at 6 p.m. sharp. You're not allowed to be late. Otherwise, you'll have to drink as punishment. Okay. Yu knew that Yun Shirshir was calling Gong Jie. She suddenly leaned over to the phone and said loudly, Uncle, remember to give red packets to Xiao Chen and me. On the other end, Gong Jie laughed and said, Little Tycoon, are you really interested in my red packets? It's the thought that counts. As for how much I'm going to give, it all depends on my performance. Yi was a cunning person. Thus, she managed to get Gong Jie to agree with her with just a few words. Gong Jie cleared his throat and said, just be good and wait for me to give you your red packets. After hanging up the phone, Yun Shirshir felt extremely happy. It was as if she was sitting on a hydrogen balloon and was slowly floating up into the clouds. She accidentally found Hua Jin's number. She was stunned for a moment and frowned. Then, she hesitated for a moment and dialed the number with a hint of anticipation. At City Condominium. Hua Jin was wearing a bathrobe and leaning against the bay window, looking at the beautiful sunset. Suddenly his phone rang. He picked it up immediately and heard Yun Shirshir's gentle and careful voice on the other end. Hua Jin, it's New Year's Eve tomorrow. Would you like to come to my house for New Year's Eve dinner? Hua Jin couldn't react in time. He choked on a mouthful of smoke and coughed for a long time. Yun Shirshir could not help but raise her eyebrows when she heard the heart-wrenching coughing coming from the phone. She was a little surprised. What's wrong? The reason why she thought of Hua Jin was because she was concerned that his family was not by his side. Wouldn't he be very lonely if he thought too much? Therefore, she wanted to invite him to her house to spend time together. Hua Jin stared blankly for a while before he suddenly laughed. Why would you think of me? Because it's New Year. If you spend it alone, won't it be very lonely? After all, it's New Year's Eve. The more the merrier. Yin Shishir said. She paused and suddenly asked in disappointment, "What's wrong? Are you unwilling? Or do you have an appointment?" "No. No." Hua Jin immediately said, "It's just that I'm very surprised. I didn't expect you to invite me to welcome the new year together." "That's because you're my family too," Yun Shishir said matter-of-factly. Hua Jin's expression froze. Instantly, a gentle smile formed on his lips. A warmth from the sky enveloped him. He was extremely touched by the simple word family. He said gently, "Okay. Okay, then you must come tomorrow night. Set your bowl and chopsticks. After the New Year's Eve dinner, let's go to the riverside to set off fireworks, okay?" "Okay." After hanging up the phone, Hua Jin looked at the screen that indicated the end of the call. However, he could not stop smiling. His heart felt extremely warm. Chapter 2202. In such a bustling city, on such a cold winter day, he actually felt that he was no longer alone. It was great to be able to celebrate the new year with everyone. When Song Jianghu received the call from the hospital, he was inevitably shocked. When he rushed to the hospital with Jiang Qiming, he saw Song Yunxi lying in the intensive care unit. His face was bruised and swollen, and his legs and arms were broken in several places. It was almost New Year's Eve, and he was actually lying in the hospital on New Year's Eve. He instantly felt that he had hit the jackpot. This kid was still fine yesterday, but he went out in the middle of the night. When he turned around, he received a notice from the hospital saying that he was lying in the hospital. When he rushed over, he saw that he was badly injured. It was obvious that he had been beaten up like this by someone. Jiang Qiming felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She threw herself at the bedside and cried, "Yunxi! Yunxi!" However, after calling for a long time, Song Yunxi did not have the strength to respond. He was still in a semi-conscious state. His mind was muddled and his jaw had been dislocated. He could not open his mouth or speak at all. Jiang Qiming gritted her teeth and cursed, "Which bastard did this to our child? It's New Year's Eve. How unlucky." Song Jianghu stood by the bed and frowned as he sized up the child. He was so angry that he could not speak. Where did this kid go last night? It's obvious that he was beaten up by someone. Where the hell did he go? Tears streamed down Jiang Qiming's face and she couldn't say a word. Song Jianghu suddenly felt frustrated. He slammed the bedside table and scolded, "Cry. Cry. You only know how to cry." She only knew how to shed tears whenever something happened to her. What else can you do other than cry? "How can my heart not ache when my child is beaten up to this state?" Jiang Qiming retorted aggrievedly. "I don't know where he went last night. If you didn't receive the call from the hospital, I would have thought that he went to fool around again. You can't take good care of your daughter and you can't discipline your son well. As a mother, can't you be more careful?" Before Jiang Qiming could defend herself, a row of medical staff suddenly walked in from the door. When the head doctor saw Song Jianghu, he said politely, "Mr. Song. Nice to meet you." The doctor chatted with Song Jianghu for a while, then invited him to the office to analyze Song Yunxi's injury. Half an hour later, Song Yunxi finally walked in with a gloomy face. However, Song Yunxi was still unconscious and was sitting at the side angrily. Jiang Qiming immediately walked over and asked worriedly, "Jianghu, what did the doctor say?" "This kid was seriously injured by someone. In addition to the fractures of his ribs, knees, tendons, shoulders, intracranial hemorrhage and moderate concussion, the doctor said that such injuries were definitely not caused by one person. It was as if he had been ganged up on by a group of people. He wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. Even after the surgery there will still be some residual effects. For this child, once there are some injuries, it means that he will have to retire early." "Retired?" Jiang Qiming widened her eyes in shock. "Why?" Chapter 2203. However, if he were to retire now, it would mean that all the meritorious service he had accumulated over the years would be gone. Song Jianghu appeared calm on the surface, but deep down he was already heartbroken and depressed. He had worked so hard and paid such a high price, all for the sake of planning a good future for this brat while he still had some power. But now look at what had happened. He had lost everything. After he retired and returned home from the BU team, it would be difficult to say that he would have a meteoric rise. This lad's great future had been ruined by him just like that. The most hateful thing was that Song Yunxi was still unconscious. Even if Song Jianghu wanted to ferociously find the culprit who had beaten his son to such a state, there was no way to find out. Song Jianghu was extremely vexed and frustrated. Be it Song Enya or Song Yunxi, they were constantly causing trouble for him. Song Enya was one thing. She was used to being pampered and noble. Because of her difficult temper, she had provoked Mu Yaja. However, before this matter could be resolved, Song Yunshi was in trouble again. Song Jinghua was really annoyed. Why were there so many troublesome matters? Just which deity had he offended? Everything had gone wrong this year. It seemed that he was destined to spend this new year in the hospital. At the thought of this, Song Jinghua smoked 2 cigarettes in a row. Then he stood up and ran to settle some work matters. Jiang Qiming stayed by the bed and held Song Yunshi's cold hands with heartache. She could only cry non-stop as if this was the only way to vent some of the depression in her heart. Early in the morning of New Year's Eve, Yun Shirshir got out of bed. As the grandest lunch of the year, the reunion dinner on New Year's Eve was indispensable. The family had to be complete and the dishes had to be sumptuous. No matter where they worked, they had to return home covered in dust and sit at the table to have a reunion dinner and share the joy of family. There were also many things to pay attention to at the reunion dinner. The must-have dish for lunch was fish, which meant that there was more than enough every year. There had to be chicken, which meant good luck, tofu and cabbage, which meant happiness and wealth, fans, which meant longevity and good luck. Yu even prepared canned peaches, which meant escape from disaster and health. Yun Shirshir was surprised. Even she had not thought of this. Lastly, there was good wine, which meant that life was everlasting and good. Early in the morning, Yun Shirshir and Yu were busy in the kitchen. In the afternoon, Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho arrived. Yun, of course, she had not wanted to invite her mother and daughter to her to invite to the New Year's Eve dinner. However, she didn't want to invite them. The mother and daughter trio were all top-notch. If she invited them, it would be hard to avoid making things unpleasant again. She didn't want to bring bad luck to the family during the new year. But when he thought about it, he felt rather embarrassed. Speaking of which, one was her aunt, and the other was her elder sister. If she forgot about them just like that, it would be hard to avoid being heartless. Yun Shirshir was caught in a dilemma and felt very conflicted. In fact, before this, Xiangyu had called Yun Yeqing and told him that the family would have a meal together on New Year's Eve. Chapter 2204. Thus she said, "It's New Year's Eve. My brother and I will just eat at home. There's no need for us to gather for a meal." His wife was displeased to hear that. "What's wrong? Do you think we're embarrassing you and embarrassing you? Now that your family is rich, you have a capable daughter, and you have a rich son-in-law, so you don't want to acknowledge us as your poor relatives anymore, do you? So what if we're poor? We're family after all, and we're not greedy for anything. Why don't you give us the honor of having a meal together on New Year's Eve?" What was the truth? In the past 2 months, the money she had brought over from her hometown had long been used up. Before they came to the capital, Xiangyu and Yun Qingyao still had a lot of yearning and anticipation for the glamorous life in the city. However, once they rented a house in the capital and started living there, the pressure came crashing down on them like a mountain, to the point where they could barely breathe. With the high rent, daily expenses and living expenses in the capital, it was already extremely difficult for them to make ends meet. Yun Qinli and Yun Qingmiao also found part-time jobs, but since they had just moved to the capital, they were unfamiliar with everything. Not to mention earning money, each of them only had a monthly salary of more than 3,000 yuan, which added up to more than 6,000 yuan. After deducting the food and transportation expenses, as well as the occasional shopping trip, they were out of money. His wife, on the other hand, was thick-skinned. She had approached him several times, saying that she was out of money and wanted to borrow some. He knew very well that the money would be wasted once he lent it out. Still, he was worried that if he did not lend them the money, the mother-daughter trio would surely cause a lot of trouble for Yun Shirshir. Thus, he secretly lent them a few sums of money behind his back, but the moment his wife tasted the sweetness, her greed kicked in and she could not take it back. When it came to New Year's Eve, Xiangyu put on a dignified front by saying that she wanted to have a reunion dinner with her family, but in reality she would probably beat around the bush or shamelessly ask Yun Shirshir for money during the meal. He did not want to make things so awkward, so he asked directly, "Did you guys run out of money again?" His wife flew into a rage out of humiliation when she heard that. "What? Brother, are you treating the 3 of us like beggars? All you talk about is money, money, money. Do you really think we're begging for food? After all, they were a family. What was wrong with celebrating the new year together? Do you hate us so much that you don't even want to have a reunion dinner with us?" Her overbearing words put Yun Yeqing in a difficult position. Unable to bear it any longer, Yun Yeho rebuked, "Don't you always talk about borrowing money? Do you really think I don't know that you borrowed money from Yi Qing behind my back? This money adds up to tens of thousands of yuan. Have you paid it back?" Xiangyu had been in the capital for a few months and she hadn't learned anything else. However, her skin had grown thicker and she grinned. Isn't it because I'm short of money? Besides, we're all family. Is there a need to be so calculative? Yun Yeho, on the other hand, did not take it to heart. As the saying goes, even blood-related brothers should settle their accounts clearly. Yi Ching has already spent a lot of energy taking care of me. Do you think he's made of iron? That's right. You don't need money to support the three of you. Chapter 2205. In a single sentence, the greed in his heart was as clear as day. Yun Yeho was so exasperated that he almost burst into tears. He almost blurted out, "All of you scram back to your hometown. If you don't have the capability, why are you all here in the capital?" Yun Yeching immediately stopped him, saying that they should not quarrel during the new year. After all, they were a family. Hence, he pulled Yun Shirshir to the side and said, "Shirshir, I have a presumptuous request. Since it's New Year's Eve today, please invite your aunts over for a reunion dinner at noon. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but they seem to be clinging on to you and insist on having a family reunion dinner. Most importantly, I don't want to make things difficult for your uncle, so please invite them over for lunch to shut their mouths and prevent them from gossiping about you behind your back. After lunch, I'll send them back in a taxi." Yun Shirshir readily agreed. Lunch was supposed to be a family reunion, so it was not a demanding thing to invite them over for a meal. However, when Xiangyu and her daughter came, the festive atmosphere was diluted by a lot. Logically speaking, no matter how close a relative was, they should not come empty-handed. A carton of milk, a tin of biscuits, or even a small toy to coax the child should at least show their sincerity. Although Yun Shirshir did not care about their etiquette, she could tell from their actions that they were sincere. But when Xiangyu came to the door, not only did she come empty-handed, she didn't even bother to change her shoes as she barged straight into the house. "Wow. Shirshir, where's your big villa? It's so grand. I saw it the moment I entered the house. Only the rich live here, right?" Xiangyu and her daughter had taken a taxi over, but they did not even have the time to pay for it. It was Yun Yeching who rushed over to pay for it after receiving a call. As soon as they entered the villa area, Xiangyu was shocked by the rows of elegant villas. They actually knew that Mu Yaja's net worth was not low, and his living conditions were superior. However, when they saw him living in such an expensive villa, the greed and passion in their eyes could not be concealed. Yun Qingyao and Yun Qinli stepped through the door. Knowing basic etiquette, they exchanged a few greetings and New Year's blessings, changed their shoes, and were instantly captivated by the luxurious decor before them. "Big Sister Shirshir, can we take a look at your villa?" Yun Qinli asked excitedly. Before Yun Shirshir could nod in agreement, Yun Qingyao grabbed Yun Qinli's hand and eagerly rushed to each room for a look. They grew up in the countryside and were used to living in houses made of mud and bricks. When they came to Beijing, they lived in rented houses that were dozens of square meters. They had only seen such luxurious villas on TV. Therefore, once he saw it with his own eyes, that kind of shock and yearning was indescribable. Fortunately, Yun Shirshir had the foresight to lock the master bedroom and the two little guys' bedroom. Chapter 2206. Yun Qingyao was so jealous that her eyes were almost red. Just as Yun Shirshir walked over, the two sisters walked out in envy and asked, "Shirshir, are all those beautiful clothes in such a big walk-in closet yours?" "Yes." Yun Shirshir nodded and Yun Qinli said enviously, "I'm so envious. There are so many clothes. If you change into one every day, it'll be enough for you to wear for a whole year." "You're exaggerating." Yun Qingyao snorted and then said flatteringly, "Shirshir is rich. Even if you buy one every day, you can wear different clothes every day." Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. Her sister's compliment made her feel awkward. Many of the clothes were sent by sponsors. She had signed a contract with Louis Vuitton some time ago, so whenever Louis Vuitton released new designs, they would send her a few styles. There was a clause in the contract that stated that she had to wear the brand's clothes whenever she attended important events. In other words, many girls yearned to wear Louis Vuitton's clothes every day, but what about her? She clearly did not like it, but she was still forced to wear it when she went out. She could not voice her bitterness. She could not say it, though, or else the two sisters would say a few more words of jealousy. "You don't know how lucky you are." Just as Yun Shirshir closed the walk-in closet door, she saw Yun Qingyao and Yun Qinli running upstairs, hand in hand. The villa was already renovated when it was handed over. Although she did not go upstairs often, it was already renovated. There was also a sky garden which she often took care of. Soon, she could hear the exclamations of Yun Qingyao and Yun Qinli from downstairs. "These flowers are so beautiful. It's good to live in a villa. It must cost a lot to buy such a spacious place, right?" Tens of millions, of course. In a place like the capital, every inch of land is worth gold, and a villa is unreasonably expensive. So, that's why it's important to marry a good man. If Shershur didn't marry such a rich brother-in-law, would she be able to live in such a luxurious villa? That's right. For people like us, if we want to live in such a villa, I'm afraid we won't be able to earn so much money even if we spend our entire lives. Yun Shershur stood downstairs, holding her forehead in pain. Why did she feel uncomfortable listening to these words that sounded like compliments? Yu and Xiao Yichen did not seem to be in high spirits either. Yun Shershur felt even more guilty when she saw the unhappy expressions on the two little guys' faces. Mu Yaja heard the noise and walked out of the study. As soon as he walked out, he bumped into Xiangyu, who was visiting the villa. He was stunned for a moment. "Auntie, Xiaomu." Xiangyu was the first to speak. "You look especially spirited in this dress today." Mu Yaja curled his lips into a lukewarm smile. His attitude was frigid as he turned to leave, ignoring him. Xiangyu was rebuffed, her hot face stuck to a cold butt. She was embarrassed for a moment. Yu and Xiao Yichen suddenly looked at each other and smiled slyly. They tacitly squeezed in front of Xiangyu and cupped their fists together. "Granny, Happy New Year. May you prosper. Give us the red packets." They were here to ask for red packets from her. Xiangyu's face turned green as she smiled awkwardly. If an adult were to say this, it would inevitably sound petty, but when it came from the mouths of two children, it felt more like a child's babble. Instead, she found it amusing and adorable. Naturally, she had to be generous when children asked for red packets. Chapter 2207. Besides, Yu and Xiao Yichen kept saying, "Happy New Year, Fat Fortune." How could she bear to reject them when they were so sweet-mouthed? Even if it was just for luck, she had to generously give them red packets. Xiangyu, on the other hand, was stunned for a moment before her lips twitched uneasily. Who would have thought that these two children would ask for red packets in front of everyone? She originally thought that Yun Shershur and Xiao Yichen would not take the initiative to ask for red packets since they were young. Hence, she thought that she would just brush them off if she could. After all, she was already struggling to make ends meet recently. If not for the fact that she was really in a tight spot, why would she shamelessly come here to freeload on the reunion dinner? She had even shamelessly asked Yun Yeching to pay for her taxi fare. Were these two children deliberately making a fool of themselves by asking her for red packets at this time? She was at a loss as to what to do. Yu's face fell when he saw her standing there in a daze, unable to get a red packet out of her. He could not help feeling a little disappointed. "Don't tell me that Grandma didn't prepare red packets for Yu and Xiao Yichen? How stingy." Xiao Yichen covered his mouth and chuckled before saying in disdain, "Grandma, don't tell me that you can't even give us a few hundred yuan as red packets. It's New Year's Eve tonight. Not only did you come empty-handed, but you didn't even prepare red packets. Don't tell me you came here to freeload?" The two little fellows echoed each other, and Xiangyu's face was completely stripped bare. If it were Yun Shershur who said such words, it would inevitably come off as harsh, unreasonable, and even mean. However, when it was these two little lads who said it, it made people laugh. While they laughed at the children's nonsense, they did not think that these two children were being rude. After all, Xiangyu's every word and action were just like what these two little lads had said. It was obvious that they were here to freeload on the reunion dinner. She didn't even prepare a red packet for the child. It was inevitable that the child would despise her. Xiangyu immediately squatted down in front of the two children and said awkwardly, "It's not that I didn't prepare anything. I didn't bring any red packets with me. There was a traffic jam on the road. They came too hastily and were not prepared. It's all your fault. Don't blame me. Tomorrow I'll prepare it for you, okay? So you didn't bring any red packets. Grandma, wait a moment." With a mischievous grin, he ran to the living room and pulled open a drawer to retrieve a stack of brand new red envelopes he had just bought from the supermarket. Taking out 2 envelopes, he ran to his mother and passed them to her. "Here." Muyaja sat at the side, trying hard not to laugh. How could he not understand this little fellow's intentions? It was obvious that he didn't like Xiangyu and her 2 daughters and wanted to embarrass them. He didn't give them a way out at all. How could you lack red packet money? But he just couldn't stand these 3 ungrateful wretches. Xiangyu looked awkwardly at the red packets that Yu handed to her. She took them resentfully but didn't do anything else for a long time. What kind of joke was this? She only had $100 with her. Was she supposed to tear the $100 in half and give half to each child? This child looked so cute and innocent. How could he be so smart? Chapter 2208. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to cry. Xiao Yichen suddenly said coldly. You forget it? It's obvious that Granny didn't prepare anything. She's so poor that she can't even fork out 200 yuan. Xiang Yu's face turned red as if blood was about to drip out of her mouth. Yu furrowed her brows in dissatisfaction. Granny doesn't care about us at all. She didn't even prepare a red packet for us. How sad. Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho looked at each other, feeling like crying and laughing at the same time. As for Yun Yeho, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, he felt extremely ashamed of his wife. He could not bear to see his wife being laughed at by the two children, so he quickly said, Yu Xiao Yichen, Grandpa has prepared red packets for you too. Come. Yu and Xiao Yichen held hands as they walked to Yun Yeho. They saw him sitting in his wheelchair and taking out 2 thick red packets from his canvas bag. He had secretly packed them beforehand. Ever since he came to the capital, his hometown would regularly send him subsidies despite his physical disability. Plus he could not stay idle. When Yun Yeqing went to work, he would do some handicrafts at home or do some simple chores. Thus he managed to save up a small sum of money. The 2 red packets did not look thick, but they were a token of his sincerity. It was the new year after all. Red packets should be given for the festive occasion. When Yun Yeqing saw this, he immediately stopped him. Yeho, forget it. You don't have much money on you. Save it to buy something for yourself. It's enough that the 2 children know your sincerity. Oh dear. Brother, it's the new year. Giving red packets to the children is more or less for the sake of happiness. It won't save much money. Yun Yeho insisted on giving them a red packet. He pulled Yu and Xiao Yichen over and stuffed them into each of their hands with a smile. Yu glanced at Yun Yeho's rough fingers, some of which were still wrapped in bandages. She didn't even need to think about how Yun Yeho had earned all this money. Xiao Yichen was a little embarrassed to accept it, but Yu smiled and said, Thank you, Grandpa. I wish Grandpa good health and a happy new year. As he spoke, he naturally stuffed it into his trouser pocket. When Xiao Yichen saw that Yu had accepted it, he accepted it as well. He smiled and gave his New Year's greetings. Since Yun Yeho was the first to give a red packet, Yun Yeqing naturally could not be left behind. He also gave the 2 kids a big red packet each. Yu and Xiao Yichen rushed to say their New Year's greetings and received the red packets. Xiao Yichen was the most adorable of them all. He even opened his father's red packet and stole a peek inside. Yu leaned over to take a peek. Xiao Yichen immediately covered his mouth and asked warily, What are you doing? Take a look. It's not like I'm snatching it from you.